Chapter 384. Only by becoming the strongest could he control everything about himself. Looking at the actions of the heavenly Tao, no matter how dissatisfied Feng Zichen was, he did not go forward to interfere. Of course, he could not interfere. With Feng Zichen's current strength, even if he did everything he could, he would not be able to shake the heavenly Tao in the slightest. If he interfered, other than embarrassing himself, there was no point. However, Feng Zichen believed that even if he did not make a move, the heavenly Tao's plan would not succeed. Hutu was not dead. As long as Hutu appeared, the heavenly Tao's plan would collapse. What he should have gotten and what he did not lack would all return to his hands. Now, he was waiting for the merit of splitting the sky to appear with Hutu's remaining true spirit. Feng Zichen did not believe that the merit of splitting the sky would do nothing after saving Hutu's true spirit. The evolution of Ping Xian continued. As time passed, she became more and more perfect, and the difference between her and Hutu became smaller and smaller. That wisp of indifferent aura had completely disappeared. If Feng Zichen had not witnessed the entire process of Ping Xian's birth with his own eyes, he would have thought that she was Hutu when he first saw her. In terms of forgery, the heavenly Tao was the true expert. Is that my sister? Outside the Blood Sea, Dijiang and the other ancestral magi suddenly had a glimmer of hope after seeing Ping Xian appear. This person. Could it be Hutu? Unfortunately, Ping Xian's figure was completely enveloped by the qi of merit and the power of samsara. Everyone used all their divine abilities, but they could only see a blurry shadow, and their aura could not be felt at all. Therefore, they could not confirm her identity. As the merit continued to pour in, Ping Xian's figure became clearer and clearer, and her strength became stronger and stronger. She kept breaking through her limits and advancing towards the saint realm. When Ping Xian's strength, when she broke through a certain limit, the qi of merit and the power of samsara could no longer hide her strength, causing a trace of her aura to leak out and be sensed by everyone. Is it Hutu? She's not dead? When the familiar strength came, everyone immediately confirmed her identity, Hutu. This familiar strength was definitely Hutu. There was no mistake. Dijiang and the others immediately wore smiles on their faces. On the other hand, the faces of Dijuantai and the others turned gloomy. He thought that the strength of the wizard tribe would be weakened, but he didn't expect that the world was unpredictable. Not only did Hutu not die, she even had a great chance of improving. This was very unbearable. The other great divines had complicated expressions on their faces. If the Lady of Earth was not dead, it meant that it would not be long before another saint appeared in the primordial world. The seventh sage. Because of Tao ancestor Hongjuan's Tao unification. From then on, the heavenly Tao was Hongjun, and Hongjun was not the heavenly Tao. Therefore, Hongjun was no longer a saint. It was also because of this that if the Lady of Earth became a saint, she would be the seventh saint of the primordial world. Hutu became a saint. This was definitely a major event that would affect the primordial world. A saint who completely belonged to the sorcerer tribe. The impact on the primordial world could be imagined. The demon clan, which was already inferior to the sorcerer clan, would have a harder time in the future. With a saint overseeing the grand formation of heavenly divine fiends, how strong would its might be? It would definitely shock the world. Moreover, the 12 ancestral sorcerers had the same roots. If one of them became a saint and their origins were connected, it wouldn't be long before the second, the third ancestral sorcerer broke through. If one of them attained the Tao, the remaining 11 would not be far away. Even if Dijiang and the others could not become saints, just stepping into the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was enough to make people tremble. The wizard tribe was really going to become the peak of the primordial world. Unfortunately, they did not know that the person inside was not Hutu, but her substitute, the puppet of the heavenly Tao, Ping Xian. No one could interfere with what Ping Xian was thinking. In the depths of her sea of consciousness, a bit of innate spiritual light was born. Then it became brighter and brighter, bigger and bigger. Gradually, it took on a human shape and had 7 orifices. Ping Xian's innate indestructible true spirit was born. She was waiting for the heavenly Tao to open her spiritual wisdom and stuff it into Hutu's memories. Then, the fake Hutu would be completely born. In the void, ripples suddenly appeared. Endless laws hung down and swept towards Ping Xi. That was the heavenly Tao's move. It wanted to open Ping Xian's wisdom and complete the last step of its plan. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. A majestic force suddenly surged out of the 6 paths of reincarnation disk, shattering the laws that surged over and enveloping Ping Xi. At the same time, a ball of purple light appeared and surged into Ping Xian's body. That power came from Pangu's thoughts. That purple light was naturally the heaven-splitting merit that protected Hutu's last true spirit. Originally, Pangu's thoughts had already exhausted its strength after helping Hutu evolve the 6 paths. It was about to disappear with Hutu. However, when the 6 paths of reincarnation disk was born, the great Tao manifested a miracle and gave off boundless strength. With this help, the strength of Pangu's thoughts was replenished. At the last moment, he hid Hutu's true spirit along with the heaven-splitting merit, creating the illusion that Hutu was dead. In this way, even the heavenly Tao could not see through it, let alone Feng Zichen. Pangu, after all, it was not his true body that descended. It was just an insignificant thought with limited power. Changing the 6 paths had already consumed all his strength. If he wanted to distort the will of the heavenly Tao, he would not be able to do so. That was why he schemed against the heavenly Tao. Even Pangu could not interfere too much with the evolution of the primordial world. Otherwise, what was the point of him opening up the primordial world? He opened up the primordial world to verify the great Tao. Only by letting it develop on its own could he get what he wanted. If everything followed his will, what was the point of opening up the primordial world? It was just a waste of energy. Therefore, Pangu rarely interfered with the development of the primordial world. He let it evolve on its own. At most, when the primordial world went down the wrong path, he would correct it. Just like now. In the heaven-splitting merit, Hutu's remaining innate true spirit slowly floated out and merged with Ping Xian's true spirit. The innate indestructible true spirit that was created using Hutu as a template was most compatible with him. Therefore, Hutu quickly merged with the true spirit and easily took over Ping Xian's body. At the same time, on the 6 paths of reincarnation, in the Magus Tao, the purple vortex that Pangu's heart had turned into suddenly spun crazily. Streams of chaos energy were pulled in and transformed into the purest power. Then, a wisp of purple light appeared. Endless laws surrounded it, emitting a mysterious and unfathomable aura. It was swallowed by the vortex. The origin of the great Tao. That was the reward given to Hutu by the great Tao. Hutu swore to the great Tao that he wanted to open up the 6 paths to fill the primordial world. Now that he had done it, the great Tao naturally had to express itself. Therefore, the great Tao gave Hutu a wisp of the origin of the great Tao. Chapter 385. First, it devoured a large amount of chaos chi. Then, it devoured a wisp of the origin of the great Tao. The purple vortex spun even faster. A powerful suction force came and pulled out wisps of the origin of heaven and earth from the void. It was also at this moment that Pangu's remaining thought suddenly threw itself into the purple vortex with the last of his strength. Boom, boom, boom. A huge force erupted, and even the 6 paths of reincarnation disk was trembling. The purple vortex suddenly condensed into a ball and turned back into Pangu's heart. A drop of purple blood as bright as the sun, with a misty color and wisps of the aura of the great Tao, dripped from Pangu's heart and flew toward Hutu. That was Pangu's blood essence. The Pangu's blood essence that had long been extinct in the primordial world. After devouring all kinds of mysterious powers, coupled with the help of Pangu's thought, Pangu's heart actually gave birth to a drop of Pangu's blood essence today. This was the supreme treasure of the primordial world. A drop could create a top Khanate saint of the primordial world with the potential of the primordial world. Whoosh! After Pangu's blood essence entered Hutu's body, it directly melted and integrated into her limbs and bones. Previously, in order to incarnate into reincarnation, Hutu's body had completely melted and disappeared completely. Even the imprints of her past existence had been melted away, leaving nothing behind. Even if one went back to the past, they would not be able to find the existence of Hudu's body. It was truly untraceable and untraceable. In other words, Hudu's ancestral witch body that dominated the primordial world could no longer be restored. Even if she became a saint, her body was only a body of merit. It was not the body of an ancestral witch. But now, everything was different. In order to compensate Hudu, before Pangu's thought disappeared, he used the last of his strength to recreate a drop of Pangu's blood essence to rebuild Hudu's body. What a great fortune! This drop of Pangu's blood essence was not stained with the heaven-opening tribulation aura. It was truly perfect and flawless. It could be said that Hudu's body was a blessing in disguise. Not only had he resolved the hidden dangers in his body, but he had also refined his bloodline. At this moment, what flowed in his body was the purest Pangu bloodline. Walala, it was the sound of blood flowing from Hudu's body like a tsunami. His body was undergoing intense changes. His body, which was originally formed entirely from virtuous chi, was twisting and breaking apart. Everything was repeating itself. New runes were born, devouring the old runes. The purple Pangu's blood essence flowed and merged into Hudu's bone marrow, transforming her to give birth to new blood. If anyone saw Hudu's current appearance, they would be extremely shocked. This was because his body was constantly spurting out blood like a fountain. It couldn't be stopped, and it looked extremely horrifying. Moreover, the blood that flowed out was golden, carrying a faint divine light. It was exceptionally shocking. This was the blood of merit, which was completely condensed from black and yellow merit. It was the most original power of heaven and earth and had great fortune. If a mortal obtained a drop, he could directly become a celestial immortal. Looking at the amount of blood flowing out, if it was obtained and refined by someone, it wouldn't be difficult to attain the Daluo Dao fruit. However, Hudu ignored such precious blood and allowed it to flow out. This was because compared to the new Pangu's bloodline in his body, the blood of merit was nothing. It was too inferior. While Pangu's blood essence was rebuilding Hudu's body, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc was not idle. It constantly absorbed the chaotic aura from the chaos and poured it into Hudu's body, helping him to further transform. At the same time, the aura of merit was still gathering towards Hudu, constantly improving his realm and continuing to lead him to the saint realm. Not long after, the blood in Hudu's body was completely transformed into Pangu's bloodline. It was purple and exceptionally beautiful. It formed a sharp contrast with the dark purple blood of the shamans. This was the color that Pangu's blood should have. Pangu was an existence that was infinitely close to the great Tao. His blood would naturally transform toward the purple color that symbolized the great Tao. Therefore, Pangu's blood was purple. The blood of the shamans who had inherited Pangu's bloodline should also be purple. However, unfortunately, when the shamans were born, they were accidentally contaminated with the heaven-opening tribulation aura, causing their bloodline to turn dark purple. This was a sign that the bloodline did not exist, and it was also a sign that the shamans were imperfect. Now, Hudu had obtained a heaven-defying opportunity and used Pangu's blood essence to form a physical body. Of course, he had to pursue perfection. In order to maintain the purity of his bloodline, he even forced the blood of merit out of his body. It was obvious that he was determined. If there was a sacrifice, there would be a gain. Hutu gave up the blood of merit and naturally obtained the purest Pangu's bloodline, becoming the first perfect shaman in the primordial world. The moment Pangu's bloodline was completed, Hutu had some kind of enlightenment. Her true spirit and physical body resonated at this moment, giving birth to a magical power. An illusory shadow gradually formed outside Hudu's true spirit. Essence Soul. At this moment, Hudu gave birth to an essence soul and broke the curse that the shamans could not give birth to an essence soul. Due to the influence of the heaven-opening tribulation aura, the shamans could not give birth to an essence soul. However, Hudu went from death to life and completely broke free from the influence of the tribulation aura. Naturally, she could give birth to an essence soul. The birth of an essence soul brought the same experience to Hudu. Looking at the rules of heaven and earth, What she saw and heard was a different kind of scenery, especially with the appearance of the essence soul, the true spirit, the essence soul, and the physical body brought Hutu a sense of perfection. It made her feel an unprecedented joy from the bottom of her heart. It was as if she had achieved the Tao. Whoosh! Suddenly, a purple airflow rushed over from an unknown place and entered Hutu's body. Hongmeng purple qi. That purple airflow was the supreme treasure that all the great magicians of the untainted land dreamed of, the foundation of becoming a saint, Hongmeng purple qi. Moreover, this purple qi was not the one left behind by Red Cloud Taoist after his death. It was the one that had slipped away from Hongjun Taoist back then. This was the Hongmeng purple qi that was independent of the celestial sect of wonders. It was said that at the beginning of the world, a total of 9 Hongmeng purple qi were born in the world. 7 of them were obtained by Hongjun Taoist ancestor, which gave birth to the celestial sect of wonders and created its supreme reputation. Of the remaining 2 Hongmeng purple qi, one took advantage of Hongjun Taoist ancestors' carelessness and plunged into the void and disappeared into the untainted land. The last Hongmeng purple qi, as soon as it was born, scattered into the untainted land and merged with it. It became a part of heaven and earth and could no longer be seen. It was because there were numbers in heaven and earth, and 9 was the extreme number. If the 9th saint was born in the untainted land, the immeasurable calamity would arrive, and the untainted land would be destroyed. Therefore, the heavenly Tao did not allow the existence of the 9th Hongmeng purple qi. His destruction was a matter of course. The Hongmeng purple qi entered his body, and the feeling that Hutu gave people suddenly changed. The smooth and flawless Tao runes that were mixed into one rose from his body. His aura also began to become stronger, and it suddenly increased by a large margin. A terrifying aura surged around him, shaking the past, present, and future, all living beings in the untainted land. This feeling is, Hutu. He's going to become a saint. A familiar feeling came, and everyone immediately understood that Hutu was going to become a saint. They had only felt this feeling of being mixed into one when the 6 saints were born. In this way, the result of what Hutu was experiencing was self-evident. Hutu's mind was emptying. He felt that his consciousness was leaving his body and forming a connection with the great existence in the unseen world. Majestic, vast, and heavy. It was not as majestic and cold as the heavenly Tao. Instead, it was as heavy as the earth, silently bearing everything. Tunnel. At this moment, Hutu understood that the thing that was connected to him was the tunnel that had never appeared in the primordial world. The heavenly Tao controlled all the order of the primordial world. The human Tao represented all the living beings of the primordial world. The tunnel silently gave and carried everything. It created mountains, rivers, and all the living beings of the primordial world. That's right. The heavenly Tao controlled order. The human Tao controlled all living beings. The tunnel gave birth to all living beings. What all living beings saw was formed by the tunnel. Even they themselves were the same. Although the tunnel had never appeared, it had always been there. It silently gave and carried everything. It did not say a word, as if it had never existed. The birth and death of all living beings were in the tunnel. Hutu used the 6 paths of reincarnation to form the Tao, so she naturally could not bypass the tunnel. Therefore, the moment she formed the Tao, the tunnel summoning came and led her consciousness to an unknown place. In a trance, Hutu saw that there were 2 paths in front of her. One of the paths was completely created by rules. It was abnormally luxurious and majestic. The path of the heavenly Tao. At the end of this path, there was a dazzling ball of light. It was enveloped by order and emitted a high and mighty aura. Without a doubt, this was the Saint Tao fruit, the Saint Tao fruit that belonged to the heavenly Tao. As long as Hutu went forward, she could take it in her hands and become an immortal heavenly Tao saint. The other path was paved by all living beings of the primordial world. It was not luxurious or majestic at all. It was simple and heavy, emitting an aura that carried everything. The path of the tunnel. At the end of this path, there was also a Saint Tao fruit. However, this Tao fruit was not the heavenly Tao Saint Tao fruit, but the Tao fruit of the earth Tao saint. On his body, There was the light of creation flickering, and there was the aura of destruction circulating. Creation and destruction coexisted, and it was abnormally magical. Especially inside him, there were the shadows of all living beings that appeared endlessly. After obtaining him, one could become an Earth Dao Saint and control all living beings. These two supreme Saint Dao fruits were placed in front of Hutu, allowing her to choose. Whether she became a Heavenly Dao Saint or an Earth Dao Saint, it was all up to her. This scene, if outsiders saw, wouldn't they be envious to death? Unfortunately, other than Hutu, no one had come to the tunnel and no one could spy on it. This moment that was enough to change history, but no one had witnessed it. What a great fortune! Looking at the two Saint Dao fruits in front of her, even though Hutu had just experienced life and death and her mental state had improved a lot, she could not help but be a little shocked. Chapter 386. One Saint Dao fruit was something that all living beings dreamed of, let alone two. The shock that it brought was definitely strong. However, Hutu was someone who had just experienced a life and death situation, so her mental state had improved greatly. Not long after, she came back to her senses and regained her calmness. Sigh. Although the heavenly Tao is good, but in the end, it's not fated with me. After hesitating for a moment, Hutu made a decision in her heart. She stepped onto the path of the Earth Tao and walked towards the Tao fruit of the Earth Tao Saint. Hutu had seen the actions of the heavenly Tao just now. In this way, how would she dare to become a heavenly Tao Saint? Perhaps one day she would be sacrificed by the heavenly Tao. One had to know that the 6 paths of reincarnation disc was still in her hands. In order to obtain this treasure, who knew what kind of schemes the heavenly Tao would make? If she became a heavenly Tao Saint, wouldn't she be walking into a trap? At that time, she wouldn't be able to run even if she wanted to. Therefore, a heavenly Tao Saint couldn't be. Besides, becoming an Earth Tao Saint, there was nothing bad about it. It was even better than becoming a heavenly Tao Saint. If she became an Earth Tao Saint, she would be the first. She would definitely have great luck. Tao ancestor Hongjun became the first heavenly Tao Saint and obtained unimaginable achievements. Huda became the first Earth Tao Saint. Even if she was not as good as Tao ancestor Hongjun, she would still be stronger than the other 6 saints. The difference between a heavenly Tao Saint and an Earth Tao Saint was obvious at a glance. Huda was not a fool. Of course, she would make the right choice. The path of the tunnel seemed to be extremely long, but the moment Huda stepped on it, it quickly shrank. After taking a few steps, Hutu reached the end. At the same time, seeing that Hutu had made her choice, the path of the heavenly Tao slowly dissipated. Taking a deep breath, Hutu stretched out her hand and grabbed the Saint Tao fruit. Boom! Everything in the primordial world. At this moment, it shook. Then, the primordial world, which had lost its color because of Hutu's fall, was revitalized. In an instant, thousands of flowers bloomed, and plants stood tall again. The ground turned green. Then, throbbing, it spread throughout the primordial world. It shocked people's hearts. At the same time, the rivers, lakes, mountains, and earth all released a feeling of joy, as if they were celebrating the birth of a great figure. Huda had become a saint. There were no flowers falling from the sky, no golden lotuses growing from the ground, no manifestation of the myriad Tao, and no pressure sweeping across the primordial world. He did not have any of the visions that other saints had when they attained Tao. Yes, there is. However, all living beings in the primordial world celebrated. The tunnel was silent. Therefore, when the Huda became a saint, there was no other phenomenon except for the related untainted land beings. However, at the moment when all living beings became saints in the Hutu, naturally he knew that he had become a saint. This was a saint, the peak of the primordial world. There was no need to do anything. Heaven and earth would naturally proclaim it. So strong. So this is a saint? Or is this the power of the tunnel? On the plate of 6 paths of reincarnation, Hudu was meditating on the changes in her body. He felt that. The current him. Incomparably powerful. With a wave of his hand, he could erase his past self. But how was this possible? With this power, no one in the primordial world could defeat him. If the sage was really so capable, how could he tolerate the sorcerer and demon clan to dominate the untainted land? It was not normal. It was extremely abnormal. Could it be such a powerful force? Only he had it and no one else had it? For a moment, Hutu's heart was filled with doubts. Is it him? After a while, Hutu completely familiarized herself with her power and her new body. Only then did she realize that the incomparably powerful power did not belong to her, nor did it belong to the tunnel. It belonged to the plate of 6 paths of reincarnation. The treasure of chaos was so powerful. When its power fully erupted, it was enough to destroy the primordial world and even kill a saint. At this moment, Hutu also understood her state. She was the first saint of the tunnel, and possibly the only one. Her strength was naturally incomparably powerful. As soon as she advanced to the saint realm, she had a cultivation level comparable to the 4th level of primordial chaos. However, compared to the other saints, she did not have much of an advantage. After all, she had just attained the Tao. The other 6 saints had already attained the Tao for many years. Their realms had already increased and most of them were at this stage. It was already a great opportunity for her to be able to be on par with them as soon as she broke through. Like the 3 pure ones and Yuwa, they were either endlessly blessed or had boundless merit. When they first reached the saint realm, they were only at the 3rd level of primordial chaos, which was far inferior to Hutu. And a person like Xuanxia, who was unlucky, was only at the 2nd level of primordial chaos when he first broke through. He was at the bottom of the saints. Even now, it was unknown if he had cultivated to the 4th level of primordial chaos. Once he broke through, he had a cultivation level of the 3rd level of primordial chaos. That was the treatment of Tao ancestor Hongjun. Hutu could be like him. It could be seen that she was extraordinary. However, unlike other saints, Hutu had the treasure of chaos, the 6 paths of reincarnation. With this treasure in hand, other than the 3 paths of heaven, earth, and man, Hutu could be said to be invincible in the primordial world. Even if the 6 saints attacked together, they might not be her match. However, it was a pity that although this treasure was powerful, it had many restrictions. The 6 paths of reincarnation was related to the reincarnation of heaven and earth. It was of great importance and could not be used easily, let alone leave the netherworld. In addition, Hutu's cultivation level was limited, so she could not fully activate her power. This treasure could only be in the netherworld. It could unleash its greatest power. In other words, Hutu's invincibility was only limited to the netherworld. There, with the 6 paths of reincarnation, she was an invincible existence. Even if Tao ancestor Hongjun came, he would not be her match. However, if she left the netherworld, she would only be a saint. Although she was still powerful, she was far from being invincible. The gap between her and the other saints was not big. What was lacking was that one used the power of the heavenly path and the other used the power of the earth. Of course, this did not mean that the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation could not interfere with the world of the living. Instead, once she left the netherworld, her power would fall and she could only unleash the power of a connate cardinal treasure. As for whether Hutu could leave the netherworld, of course she could. She was a true saint, not a puppet of the later generations. Naturally, there were no restrictions. However, now that the reincarnation had just opened, it was not too stable. She needed to suppress it here to prevent the reincarnation from being unbalanced. She could not leave the netherworld easily. She could only wait for heaven and earth to operate spontaneously. Only then would it slowly get better. Perhaps Hutu's cultivation level was stronger. Even the 6 paths of reincarnation, they could be used in the outside world. Strength was everything. After stabilizing her cultivation level, Hutu tidied up her clothes and walked out. It was time to meet the people outside. Boom! As Hutu took a step forward, a heavy force suddenly hung down from the void, transforming into the shadows of all things in the primordial world, hanging behind Hutu. It was a tunnel. At this moment, a tunnel that had never appeared in the primordial world. It had appeared. Chapter 387. No matter how low-key the tunnel was, the Buddha became a saint and the 6 paths of reincarnation were opened. It was enough to change the ancient, present, and future of the primordial world. He had to appear and show his presence. After all, from now on, the Buddha would be his spokesperson in the primordial world. She would be his face and could not be underestimated. Rumble. The power of the tunnel spread out and swept through the sky and earth, causing everything to tremble. It was as if a huge rock was covering everyone's hearts. It was abnormally heavy, making it difficult for them to breathe. A moment later, the tunnel finished showing its presence, its power slowly receded. Only then did everyone let out a long sigh of relief. Facing the tunnel and facing the heavenly Tao were 2 different experiences. The former was dignified, while the latter was heavy. Although they were both high and far, they gave people a completely different feeling. The heavenly Tao made people feel small and insignificant. The tunnel made people feel that life and death were not in their own control. These were the 2 manifestations of the will of the primordial world. After experiencing this, the great divine abilities had a deeper understanding of heaven and earth. As the closest existence of the primordial world, the great divine abilities could comprehend supreme mysteries from the changes of heaven and earth to improve their cultivation. And this change, whether it was good or bad, could be of help to them. Every time the great calamity of heaven and earth erupted, what these people were thinking was not how to solve the great calamity, but how to obtain the greatest benefits from it. In fact, some great divine abilities would take the initiative to provoke the great calamity to trigger the changes of heaven and earth. After all, it was too difficult to advance when one's strength reached their level. It was useless to rely on oneself. They could only rely on external forces. And destruction was often simpler than creation. If one could not think of a good thing that could change the primordial world, they could only use their brains to use the dense and tangled karma in the world to trigger a great calamity and push the changes in the primordial world. In the later generations, apart from the calamity, there would be great chaos in the world from time to time. It might not be that there were no great divine abilities behind it. In order to go further, some people's madness was something that outsiders could not understand. The taste of becoming stronger was addictive. In short, the Buddha became a saint. While bringing pressure to the great divine abilities of the primordial world, it also brought them many benefits. It was also a great opportunity to be able to observe the heaven and earth Tao and comprehend the difference between them. After the tunnel retracted its power, Hutu's power gushed out and swept across the untainted land. His 4th-level primordial chaos. How could this be? He just broke through. At this moment, he sensed Huda's aura. Kunlun Mountain's Jade Mirage Palace, Shoyang Mountain's 8 Visions Palace, East Sea's Golden Turtle Island, Splendid Goddess Nviwa's Palace, and Mount Meru's Great Strength Hall. The 6 sages opened their eyes and exclaimed in disbelief. His demeanor. They were filled with doubt and shock. He had completely lost the calmness that a saint should have. From this, one could see the astonishment in his heart. Buddha could become a saint. They were not surprised. After all, the amount of reincarnation merit was simply too great. It was more than enough to help Hudu become a saint. What the 6 sages didn't expect was Hudu's cultivation level. She was too strong. When they became saints, they were only at the 2nd or 3rd level of primordial chaos. After many years of hard work, they had barely reached the 4th level of primordial chaos. However, as soon as Huda broke through, she had a 4th-level primordial chaos cultivation base and was on par with them. How could they, who were proud and arrogant, accept this? Didn't this mean that they were inferior to Hudu? Among the 6 sages, Saint Zhuan-Ti felt the most uncomfortable. He and Jie-in were born poor and did not have a rich family background. They were far from being as well off as the 3 pure ones, Nuwa, and the others. Apart from their own efforts, they were able to achieve their current achievements mainly because of the karma between Tao ancestor Hongjun and the Western sect. Therefore, when they became saints, they were only at the 2nd level of primordial chaos cultivation base. They were not as good as the 3 pure ones, Nuwa, nor were they as good as Hu. Even now, Jie had just broken through to the 4th level of Primordial Chaos Cultivation base. Taoist Juan-Ti was even at the 3rd level of Primordial Chaos Cultivation base. They could be said to be at the bottom of the saints. As such, when he saw that Huda had a cultivation base that far exceeded his as soon as she broke through, Taoist Juan-Ti naturally felt uncomfortable. He couldn't help but look at Huda with a hint of envy and jealousy. He thought that after Huda broke through, he would be able to get rid of the awkward situation of being the weakest saint. However, he didn't expect that reality and imagination were always two different things. A powerful force swept across, suppressing all living beings to the ground, unable to raise their heads. However, there was no fear on the faces of all living beings. Instead, they were filled with joy. That was because they knew that this aura belonged to Goddess Hu. Goddess Hutu. Goddess Hudu. The merciful Goddess Huda had returned. Not only did she not die, but her cultivation base had also improved. She had become an indestructible and limitless saint. Everyone respected Hutu to begin with. Among the tyrannical magi, Hutu's benevolence was particularly eye-catching. In the primordial world, many races had received her grace. Just now, Hudu had willingly transformed into reincarnation for the sake of all living beings in the world. The countless living beings in the world had all received her grace, so they were naturally grateful to her. Now that Hudu had revived and returned, her strength had improved again. Seeing this, all living beings were grateful for her kindness and could not help but feel happy for her from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, the hearts of all living beings, they had reached a resonance. Suddenly, a change occurred. Specks of light flew out from the heads of all living beings like fireflies. They swayed and gathered towards Huda. Above her head, they formed a resplendent halo. Above it, the phantom of all living beings appeared. The mighty power of the human Tao surged endlessly. That was the halo of the human Tao. It was condensed from the power of all living beings and had supreme magic. With the protection of all living beings, all spells would be invincible. An inexplicable throbbing came, causing people to tremble from the bottom of their hearts. They did not dare to look directly at Hutu. It was as if she was the most noble existence in the world, making people want to submit to her. That was the greatness of the human Tao, to dominate all living beings. The human Tao was all living beings. Those who were blessed by the mighty power of the human Tao. Naturally, they could be called the most noble. They should be the model of all living beings. Huda's reincarnation benefited not only the primordial world, but also countless living beings. Therefore, after the tunnel, only then would the human Tao descend. To bless Hutu and bless her. Hiss, that's the human Tao halo, how enviable. At the side, Feng Zichen could not help but say with envy when he saw the human Tao halo suddenly appear on Hutu's head. That was the treasure that he had dreamed of. To him, the ability of the human Tao halo to avoid all spells was incidental. It was not important at all. In fact, it did not matter if it did not have the slightest ability. What Feng Zichen really cared about was the meaning of the human Tao halo. That was the recognition of all living beings. Only by obtaining the recognition of all living beings could one obtain the blessing of the human Tao halo. If this item fell into his hands, in an instant, it could restore the 10,000 spirit crown to a connate cardinal treasure. This item was one of the characteristics of the human emperor. It complemented the crown of all living beings. With the human Tao halo, if Hutu wanted to, she could fight for the position of the human emperor. Of course, that was just a thought. She had no chance of becoming the human emperor in this lifetime. Because the demon race would not recognize her as the human emperor. It would never happen. There was an irreconcilable blood feud between them. If the demon race was destroyed, perhaps Hutu would still have a chance to fight for the position of the human emperor. Unfortunately, the demon race would not be destroyed. Even if they declined to the extreme, they would not be destroyed. Demons, all living beings with spirits were demons. How could such a race be destroyed? Moreover, the demon race had more than 3,000 Daluo Jingxian. That was the immortal and indestructible Daluo Jingxian. With such a foundation, The decline of the demon race was only temporary. When these demon gods recovered, the demon race could become the top force of the primordial world at any time. Therefore, Tu had no hope of becoming the human emperor. Her birth determined this. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Isn't the best way to gain the recognition of all living beings to make them feel grateful? Suddenly, Feng Zichen's mind stirred. From Huda's actions, he thought of a way to quickly gain the recognition of all living beings. That was to save all living beings from fire and water. In this world, the three greatest benefactors were the greatest benefactors. They were the grace of giving birth, the grace of achieving the Tao, and the grace of saving lives. The grace of giving birth, that was the merit of heaven and earth. Feng Zichen could not do it. The grace of achieving the Tao, that was the merit of Tao ancestor Hongjun. The three sermons in the Purple Cloud Palace not only set the quasi-saint realm and the six saints, but also spread the great Tao of the celestial sect of wonders throughout the primordial world, setting the supreme status of the celestial sect of wonders in one fell swoop. This merit, although Feng Zichen was also doing it, the effect was not very good. The celestial sect of wonders was currently in the limelight and was the mainstream cultivation of the primordial world. It was extremely difficult for the Tao of the God Fiend to snatch food from the tiger's mouth and occupy a place in the primordial world. Ever since the Tao was preached to the Magi, so many years had passed. The Tao of the God Fiend had also affected the few races around the human race and the Magi. It was completely unpresentable. This was the result of Huda's efforts. The effect was better than nothing. In other words, it was not of much use. Even the three races that were on good terms with Feng Zichen did not think much of the Tao of the God Fiend. There were very few people who cultivated this Tao, and only some of the water race with impure bloodlines cultivated it. If the three races were like this, how could they be in the primordial world? Other than the East Sea and the Magi, not many people in the primordial world had heard of the Tao of the God Fiend. In the end, it was not the right time for the Tao of the God Fiend to appear, so it could not prosper. In the current primordial world, the Khanate Qi was extremely abundant. The descendants of the 10,000 races were born, and there was no need to worry about the deterioration of their bloodlines. The preciousness of the Tao of the God Fiend could not be reflected at all. Wait a minute. When the postnatal era arrived, the Khanate Qi in the world would be replaced by the postnatal Qi. The descendants of the 10,000 races would no longer be Khanate lifeforms. At this time, the advantage of the Tao of the God Fiend was completely reflected. Its heaven-defying effect was simply a life-saving straw for the 10,000 races. It was their hope of transforming into Khanate lifeforms. In this way, it would be difficult for the Tao of the God Fiend not to prosper. It would definitely lead an era of the primordial world. However, that was all in the future. Now, the Tao of the God Fiend, it was not of much use. On the other hand, the Khanate sword Tao gave Feng Zichen a pleasant surprise. Ever since he established the Khanate sword Tao, he had not cared about it and allowed it to develop on its own. Over the years, the Khanate sword Tao had developed quite well. It far surpassed the Tao of the God Fiend that Feng Zichen had tried his best to promote. It had obtained the recognition of many races. It was also thanks to the Khanate sword Tao that the 10,000 spirit crown could be restored from a high-grade Khanate spirit treasure to a supreme-grade Khanate spirit treasure. That was true. The power of the Khanate sword Tao was extremely strong. It was indeed a top-notch way of killing. Naturally, there were many people who cultivated in the primordial world. In addition, there were many experts who used swords in the primordial world. There were even more Khanate divine swords born in the world. With this natural advantage, even if Feng Zichen did not promote the Khanate sword Tao, he would slowly prosper in the primordial world. In the future, there would definitely be a day when the sword Tao would prosper. This was the general trend, unstoppable. According to Feng Zichen's original plan, he planned to rely on promoting the Tao of the God Fiend and the Khanate sword Tao to obtain the recognition of the 10,000 races. In this way, the 10,000 spirit crown would be restored to a Khanate cardinal treasure. If the Tao of the God Fiend did not work, he would use the Khanate sword Tao. At the very least, there was the Tao of currency, the Tao of Qi pills, and even the Tao of talismans in the future. As long as one of them flourished, the Khanate cardinal treasure 10,000 spirit crown would be completed. Of course, this was Feng Zichen's plan in the past. Now, after being inspired by the hoodoo, he had a new plan. Life-saving grace. In this world, other than the grace of giving birth and the grace of attaining the Tao, only the grace of saving one's life could make people feel grateful. That was what the hoodoo did. She transformed into reincarnation and saved the future of all living beings. She made the 10,000 spirits cry and condensed the halo of the human path. Feng Zichen planned to follow suit, transforming into reincarnation. He could not do it. It was also impossible. Therefore, he did not plan to use this method. Instead, he looked elsewhere. Mount Buzhou collapsed. That was the method that Feng Zichen thought of. It was also the only chance for him to save all living beings in the primordial world in recent years. After the Great Magi Demon War ended, the Grand Magus Gonggong angrily touched Mount Buzhou, causing the heavenly pillar to break and the sky to collapse. A huge hole appeared in the sky. Immediately, the water of the heavenly river poured down and drowned the primordial world. Heavenly fire descended and burned 1,000 people in the world. All living beings in the primordial world. Immediately, they fell into an abyss of suffering. Feng Zichen's goal was to save them. Of course, he was not going to mend the sky. That was Nuwa's destiny. Outsiders could not snatch it away. In this world, only the cauldron of heaven and earth in Nuwa's hand. Only then could he turn the acquired object into an innate object and refine the 5-colored stone into a heaven-mending treasure. His plan was to block the gap in the sky and stop the flood and the heavenly fire from spreading while Nuwa collected the 5-colored stone and refined the heaven-mending stone. In this way, all living beings would be grateful. In addition to his previous accumulation, it would not be difficult to condense the halo of the human path. Perhaps, he would save all living beings from the fire and water. That was how this story came about. The Hutu is here. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Just as Feng Zichen was thinking, the hoodoo had already arrived in front of him. He bowed slightly to him and thanked him. If Feng Zichen had not brought him the merit of opening the sky, how could he have survived today and obtained such a supreme fortune to become the #1 saint of the Earth Tao? He would have probably been schemed to death by the heavenly Tao. Even after his death, his identity would be impersonated. Chapter 388. Therefore, after settling everything, she did not bother to greet the ancestral magi first. She hurriedly ran to Feng Zichen's side and thanked him. What was the grace of achieving the Tao? That was it. This karma could be said to be huge. Just like the karma between Taoist Red Cloud and Xianxia, it was the grace of becoming a saint. It was not easy to repay. In order to avoid karma, Xianxia allowed Taoist Red Cloud to die. However, the Lady of Earth obviously would not do that. That was because the relationship between the two parties was different. The Lady of Earth and Feng Zichen were family. Taoist Red Cloud and the two Western saints were not. No! Fellow Taoist, you can't do that. After coming back to his senses, Feng Zichen hurriedly dodged to the side when he saw that. He did not dare to accept the Lady of Earth's bow. Not to mention that the Lady of Earth was now a saint. With her #1 merit in the primordial world and her identity as the Lord of Samsara, Feng Zichen would lose many blessings if he accepted her bow. He would probably be plagued by bad luck for the next 10,000 years or even 100,000 years. He would be struck by lightning when he went out, step on feces when he walked, and suffer from qi deviation in seclusion. He would be extremely unlucky and would not be able to rest in peace. Even if a saint accepted the Lady of Earth's bow, his situation would not be any better. Seeing Feng Zichen's anxious look, the Lady of Earth could not help but laugh. All along, Feng Zichen had given her the feeling that everything was under control. She had never seen Feng Zichen so flustered. Now that she suddenly saw it, she naturally lost her composure. However, immediately, the Lady of Earth realized that what she had done was a little inappropriate. She quickly straightened her expression and put on an apologetic expression. I was rude. Fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. If Feng Zichen had not heard her laughter, she might have been fooled by the Lady of Earth. It's fine. Feng Zichen waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. Such a small matter was like a joke between friends. Of course, he would not take it to heart. I have yet to congratulate you on attaining the Tao. From now on, I won't be worn down by any tribulations, and I won't be tainted by any karma. I'm boundless and limitless. How enviable! Feng Zichen cupped his fist and congratulated Hutu. Once he became a saint, everything would naturally be different. It was perfection, primordial chaos, and supreme. It's all thanks to you that Hutu is able to achieve what she has today. Fellow Taoist, you have done me a great favor. Besides, with your talent, it's only a matter of time before you reach the Chaos Tao realm. At that time, fellow Taoist, how carefree will you be when you roam the primordial Chaos Tao fruit? You have much more freedom than us saints. Why do you have to envy us? Huda shook her head and sighed. After becoming a sage, he naturally understood the difference between a sage and primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. The former could borrow the power of the underground tunnel to cultivate faster than primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, but he also lost part of his freedom. The latter, although his cultivation progress was slower than that of the saints, he was relatively free and didn't have so many restrictions. It could be said that they each had their own advantages and disadvantages. However, it was obvious that the saints had more advantages than primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. That was because the saints could mobilize the power of the heavenly path. In the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was definitely no match for the saints. Only after leaving the primordial chaos could they have a fair battle. Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. Everything you have now is what you deserve. Of course, there is the help of Father God, but Father God wouldn't help you for no reason, right? Naturally, you are worthy of him doing that. So, this has nothing to do with me. I just happened to be there. Feng Zichen didn't agree with Hutu's words. It was his credit and he would never deny it. He wasn't that stupid. If it wasn't his, he couldn't simply recognize it. This was about the principles of being a person. From the beginning to the end, he had only given a heaven-splitting merit. The rest was Pangu's effort. It really had nothing to do with him. And Pangu had made a move because Hutu had transformed into reincarnation. This was something that Hutu had exchanged her life for, so it had nothing to do with him. Fellow Taoist, there's no need to refuse. Hutu knows what to do with this matter. Hutu didn't care much about Feng Zichen's words. What he thought was his business, and it had nothing to do with her. She felt that Feng Zichen had helped her a lot, and that was enough. If it weren't for the heaven-splitting merit on him, the consequences would have been unimaginable. By the way, fellow Taoist, this thing is for you. It might be of great use to you. As if thinking of something, Hutu suddenly reached out and grabbed at the void. Immediately, the world changed, and the tunnel that had disappeared appeared again. Rumble! Hutu's right hand suddenly emitted a light, and boundless power erupted. She grabbed at the tunnel fiercely and took a wisp of origin from his body. Such a huge commotion naturally alarmed the people outside who were waiting for Hutu to appear. What happened? For a moment, everyone used their supernatural powers and looked at the 6 paths of reincarnation disc in confusion. They didn't know if Hutu did it on purpose. She could have taken the source of the tunnel without any fluctuations, but she caused such a huge commotion and attracted everyone's attention. Schwa. Just as everyone's gaze was about to be cast over, Hutu suddenly activated the 6 paths of reincarnation disc and completely hid Feng Zichen's figure, so that no one could discover him. Then, everyone's gaze pierced through the layers of fog and happened to see Hutu putting away the source of the tunnel. That's the source of the tunnel. He's already a saint of the Tao. What's the use of this thing? Could it be? Seeing Hutu's strange actions, everyone was puzzled at first, but then they seemed to understand something. It was reported that the sword ancestor was a wizard of the wizard race and had an extremely close relationship with the wizard race. It was also reported that the sword ancestor had already opened the flower of the heavenly path and the flower of the human path. He was still short of a flower of the Tao to become the great Taoist priests. It could be said to be the most powerful in the primordial world. In this way, Hoodoo's purpose of grabbing the source of the tunnel. It was self-evident. She was going for the sword ancestor to help him become the great Taoist priests. Thinking of this, everyone's gaze could not help but become complicated. If this was true, then the primordial world would soon welcome a supreme expert who was invincible in the Daluo Jingxian realm. The great Taoist priests. The title of the god of creation, Pangu, had boundless power. He not only represented the invincibility of the Daluo, but also represented the future of the primordial chaos. In other words, after becoming the great Taoist priests, he was destined to become the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. It could not be changed and it would not change. That was why the Dao seat of a great Dao sovereign was so precious. The primordial chaos Dao realm. This was what the great divines yearned for. To be honest, they really did not care about the title of Daluo being invincible. Even if Daluo was invincible, so what? Could he defeat a saint? Could he defeat Tai? Wasn't he just like them, struggling under the primordial chaos and bitterly searching for the path of transcendence? Now, seeing that someone was about to become the great Taoist priests and step onto the path of primordial chaos, everyone's hearts were naturally complicated. Chapter 389. After taking the source of the tunnel, the Lady of Earth waved her hand, and the 6 paths of reincarnation rotated with a loud bang. A thick fog appeared and covered everything here, making it impossible for outsiders to peek into this place. I'll give this to you, fellow Taoist, to help you. At this moment, the Lady of Earth finally had the time to hand the source of the tunnel to Feng Zichen. Thank you, fellow Taoist. After taking the source of the tunnel, Feng Zichen's hands were trembling with excitement. He really had no reason to refuse the Lady of Earth's gift. After all, this item was too important to him. It was related to his future path. Moreover, the purpose of his visit. Wasn't it just for this? Of course, he couldn't refuse. At this moment, Feng Zichen was sure. His future was stable. Primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was right in front of him. All that was needed was a long period of precipitation. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to be so polite. Compared to the help you have given me, this bit of source of the tunnel is really nothing. Compared to the karma of becoming a saint, although the source of the tunnel was precious, it was indeed incomparable. Feng Zichen smiled and didn't say anything. Since the Lady of Earth had said so, he didn't know how to respond. It was better to smile. There were some things that were good to remember in his heart. Today, the Lady of Earth could be considered a great help to him. Not only did she not expose his incarnation, but she also took the source of the tunnel for him and solved one of his problems. Originally, even without the help of the Lady of Earth, Feng Zichen had a way to get the source of the tunnel. However, there was a problem that gave him a headache. That was, how could he send the source of the tunnel to his main body without exposing his identity? This was simply impossible. With such a treasure in hand, who wouldn't use it for themselves? Wasn't it obvious that there was a problem with giving it away? At this moment, the Lady of Earth deliberately collected the source of the tunnel in front of everyone. She was telling them that this was obtained for Feng Zichen and perfectly solved his problem. It was really a great help. Besides, did he really think that it was a simple matter for the Lady of Earth to capture the source of the tunnel? Don't be fooled by his relaxed and casual look just now. That was because it was his first time grabbing the source of the tunnel. In the future, it would not be so easy. This was the only time Hoodoo had the privilege of being the first saint of the Earth Dao. Next, if he wanted to obtain the origin source of the Earth Tunnel, he would have to pay a steep price. From the perspective of Dao ancestor Hong Jun, if there were no restrictions with his personality, wouldn't he steal a large amount of the heavenly Dao's origin? Obviously, he did not. This meant that there was a limit to the power of the Dao of theft. Fellow Taoist, I'm going out to meet my brothers. Do you want to come with me? After a while, Hoodoo asked Feng Zichen. He had been here long enough, and the people outside should be getting impatient. It was time to go out. I can't expose this incarnation of mine, so I won't meet with people I know, lest I give myself away. Feng Zichen shook his head and refused. At the same time, he looked at the nether realm in front of him and spoke in a low voice. Furthermore, I have a premonition. My opportunity is about to arrive. Following Feng Zichen's gaze, Huda looked into the depths of the nether realm. What entered her eyes were endless black flames. That was the location of hell. Feng Zichen's opportunity should be there. With the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the nether realm also welcomed the opportunity to appear. Now, he was accumulating strength. It wouldn't be long before he completely manifested in the world and became the same as the heaven realm. At that time, it would be the time for Feng Zichen to become the Lord of Hell. I see. Thinking of Feng Zichen's current identity, Hudu's heart skipped a beat, and she understood the reason. The ghost path was born from the path of death, and it was fated with the nether realm. As the ancestor of the ghost path, Fengdu was one of the natural rulers of the nether realm. When the nether realm appeared, he would naturally be able to obtain endless benefits. Fellow Taoist, you have good fortune. It seems that I will be neighbors with fellow Taoist in the future. With a smile, Huda said, she was the Lord of Reincarnation, and Fengdu was the Lord of Hell. He might even be the Lord of the nether realm. The two of them lived in the nether realm together. Weren't they neighbors? Then, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Fengdu from now on. Feng Zichen also smiled and replied. Even if he really became the Lord of the nether realm, he would definitely not be a match for Hutu in the nether realm. Therefore, with Hutu's support, he could gain a foothold in the nether realm at the fastest speed. After leaving the nether realm, my strength has indeed weakened a lot. After bidding farewell to Feng Zichen, Huda walked straight out of the sea of blood, intending to meet Dijiang and the others. However, as soon as she left the nether realm, she felt that her strength was rapidly weakening. At the same time, the connection between her and the 6 paths of reincarnation had also fallen to a freezing point. Although she could still sense everything about the 6 paths of reincarnation, it had become extremely difficult to activate her ability. The price she had to pay was far beyond her imagination. Sigh, is it a restriction of the heavenly Tao? Sighing, Hudu continued to walk forward. Even though she was the first Tao saint, the power of the heavenly Tao was still something she could not contend with. She was not as strong as others, so there was nothing she could do. Sister! Seeing Hudu walk out, Dijiang could not help but shout in surprise. I've made you worry. It's Hudu's fault. Coming in front of the ancestral magi, Hutu said apologetically. It's good that you're fine. From now on, don't do such a stupid thing anymore. Even if you want to do it, you have to discuss it with us first. Don't do stupid things alone. Could it be that the intelligence of the 12 of us is not as good as yours? After confirming that Hudu was not only fine, but also a blessing in disguise. While Dijiang let out a long sigh, he did not forget to put on a serious expression and reprimand him. Dijiang was the eldest son of Pangu. Even saints were not as noble as him. Moreover, Hudu was his sister, so she naturally had the right to reprimand him. Yes, Big Brother is right. This time, it's Hutu's recklessness. Knowing that she had made a mistake, Huda did not refute Dijiang's reprimand. At this moment, her heart was filled with lingering fear. She had long been prepared for death. However, after her death, the heavenly Tao created Ping Xen to replace her. This was something that Hutu had never expected. If the Magi really treated Ping Xen as her, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, she was still alive. Congratulations to Goddess Hutu for becoming a saint. After a while, seeing that Hutu and the ancestral Magi had finished catching up, the great Magi stepped forward to congratulate her. This call of Goddess Hu was sincere and came from the bottom of her heart. It represented their respect for the Hutu's reincarnation. Thank you, fellow Taoists. Hutu hurriedly returned the greeting. Fellow Taoist Hutu, now that reincarnation has appeared, what about the demon race? Suddenly, Dijun took a step forward and asked Hutu. Liches and demons could not coexist. Reincarnation was in the hands of Hutu. If she targeted the demon race, then the demon race would be in big trouble. That was why Dijun asked this question. He wanted to know Hutu's attitude. If Hudu had the intention to target the demon race, then reincarnation was important. Dijun would not let the demon race enter reincarnation after death. At most, he would use the starlight of the heavenly cycle to enlighten the demons. This way, although the price was high, it was better than being tampered with during reincarnation. The heavenly Tao is fair, and so is reincarnation. Those who enter reincarnation only look at the amount of merit and the amount of negative karma, not the body. When it came to reincarnation, Huda could not help but become serious and said as if she was making an oath. The reincarnation of heaven and earth was a matter of great importance. If it could not be fair and just, then the karma involved would be great. Even saints would not end well. Those who were involved in this matter would end up even more miserable. They would probably sink into oblivion forever. Okay. Fellow Taoist, if you say so. This penniless priest is relieved. Nodding, Dijun expressed his understanding. After that, he turned around and left this place. The purpose of his stay here was to get a guarantee from Hutu. Now that his goal had been achieved, what was the point of staying here? To congratulate Hutu on becoming a saint? Stop joking. Dijun was afraid that the primordial world, the person who did not want to see Hutu become a saint the most. As for whether Hutu would lie to him, Dijun was not worried at all. When one's cultivation reached their level, their every move was in harmony with the Tao. Every word they said would be recorded by heaven and earth and witnessed by the heavenly Tao. It was like an oath that could not be easily violated. Moreover, Hutu was still in front of him. In front of so many great magicians in the primordial world. If he violated what he said today, then the one who would settle the score with him would be the heavenly Tao. However, even with Huda's guarantee, Dijun did not dare to let all the demons go through reincarnation after they died. At the very least, after the death of the Tai Jingxian level demons, he would not let them go through reincarnation. After going to the land of reincarnation, Dijun would completely lose control. Who knew what would happen? Huda was his enemy after all. And the enemy's guarantee, no matter how firm it was, could not be trusted. In addition, after witnessing Huda's creation of reincarnation, Dijun also received a lot of inspiration. He gradually had a big plan in his heart. The demon summoning banner. A supreme grade innate spirit treasure. It contained a trace of the true spirit of all the demons except Daluo Jingxian. It was one of the most precious treasures of the demons. If the principle of reincarnation was injected into the demon summoning banner, coupled with the power of Zhouxing, it might be possible to revive the dead. In this way, the demons would be able to escape the restrictions of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and Dijun would be completely at ease. However, this plan was just Dijun's idea. Whether it could really be realized or not, he still had to study it carefully. Dijun returned to the heavenly court in a hurry. He might have the thought of gathering everyone to discuss this matter. Fellow Taoist Hudu, are all the creatures in the primordial world in the 6 paths of reincarnation? Not long after Dijun left, another powerful figure asked the Hutu. The power of the 6 paths of reincarnation was all inferred by them. It was far less detailed than the Hutu, the master of reincarnation. Now that the main character was in front of them, they naturally had to ask clearly. That's right. Other than the innate god fiends born from the great Tao of heaven and earth, all the creatures in the primordial world are in the 6 paths of reincarnation. The innate god fiends were the incarnations of the Tao. They were destined to become Daluo Jingxian. They were born from the origin of heaven and earth and had great creation. They were existences that the power of reincarnation could not reach. Only heaven and earth could create them, so they were not in the 6 paths of reincarnation. And all the creatures in the primordial world did not have such treatment. As long as they had enough merit, except for the innate god fiends, they could choose any race or origin. Will Daluo Jingxian also enter the 6 paths of reincarnation after he dies? Another powerful figure asked. As soon as this person finished speaking, the atmosphere suddenly changed. It instantly quieted down. Everyone stared at the Hutu, waiting for her answer. That was the real purpose of everyone present. All the previous questions were to pave the way for this. Because they were Daoyuo Jingxian, this matter was closely related to them. They naturally had to ask clearly. Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. Daoyuo Jingxian is the appearance of the Tao, the carrier of the Tao. He exists with the heavens and the Tao. There is no time for him to die. How can he enter reincarnation? Fellow Taoists, don't worry. The 6 paths of reincarnation have nothing to do with Daoyuo Jingxian. How could the Hudu not understand everyone's purpose? She hurriedly explained. If this matter was not explained clearly and caused misunderstandings among the people present, then it would be troublesome. Phew. Thank you for explaining, fellow Taoist Hutu. That person let out a long sigh of relief, as if he had put down a huge stone in his heart, and thanked the Hutu. That was true. Reincarnation was for the dead. Daoyuo Jingxian did not have the concept of death, so he naturally would not be involved in it. When the other powerful beings heard this, the expressions on their faces also relaxed. If Daoyuo Jingxian had to go to reincarnation after his death, then the existence of the 6 paths of reincarnation should be carefully considered. That's right. If the 6 paths of reincarnation could really affect Daoyuo Jingxian, then the powerful beings present would not mind destroying him. Who did not have some trump cards and secrets? But under reincarnation, could these secrets and trump cards still be hidden? It was equivalent to exposing everything about himself. In this way, how could the powerful beings be willing? Moreover, after entering reincarnation, whether he lived or died would be completely up to the Hutu. In this way, the powerful beings would be even more unwilling. Moreover, reincarnation was not a good thing. When the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared, all living beings saw the hope of living a new life. However, the powerful beings had a high realm, so what they saw was naturally different from all living beings. The appearance of reincarnation was to reduce the burden of heaven and earth, not to increase the burden of heaven and earth. So, how could he let all living beings reincarnate again and again? In the eyes of the powerful beings, the 6 paths of reincarnation were a tool for heaven and earth to recover the origin. Anyone, every time they reincarnated, a wisp of their true spirit would be extracted and returned to heaven and earth. The more reincarnations, the more true spirit would be lost. What was even more terrifying was that the power of the true spirit would be extracted by reincarnation every time. Unless you could be stronger than the previous life. Otherwise, even if the innate god fiends experienced reincarnation many times, they would slowly degenerate into postnatal living beings. Seeing this, the powerful beings did not dare to enter reincarnation. The true spirit was the foundation of the great Tao. It was even more important than the innate origin. Every time he lost a wisp, even Daoyuo Jingxian would feel heartache for a long time and spend a lot of time to recover. After all, no one's cultivation base was raised by the wind. How could they take the initiative to enter reincarnation to be worn down? Chapter 390. The Tao of Reincarnation is extremely mysterious. Even as the owner of the 6 paths of reincarnation, I don't dare to say that I have grasped all of its mysteries. As for this Tao, I only know a little and don't have a deep understanding of it. Therefore, fellow Taoists, you don't have to worry about me tampering with the reincarnation. After a while, in order to dispel everyone's doubts, the Lady of Earth explained further. That was the truth. The Tao of reincarnation was vast and profound. It could be said to be all-encompassing. All Tao and principles could be found in it. The Lady of Earth had never cultivated such a supreme great Tao before. How could she easily comprehend it now? She could use the power of reincarnation if she wanted, but it was impossible for her to control it as she pleased and reach a detailed level. That was because the Lady of Earth did not understand the Tao of reincarnation at all. The power of reincarnation that she could use belonged to the 6 paths of reincarnation, not her own. Now, the Lady of Earth only controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation, not the Tao of reincarnation. There was still a difference. However, with the 6 paths of reincarnation, if the Lady of Earth cultivated the Tao of reincarnation, it would be like the heavens were helping her. It would not be long before she could completely grasp the Tao of reincarnation. That was an opportunity that others could not envy. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, you must be joking. Your character, everyone in the primordial world knows. Why would we suspect that you would tamper with the reincarnation? Someone smiled and said, some things were easy to say. Of course, they would not say that they were suspecting the Lady of Earth's character. That would offend her. Fellow Taoists, is there anything else you want to ask? It's rare for everyone to gather together. Let's raise it together so that I can answer your questions. The Lady of Earth scanned everyone present and said, ever since the Purple Cloud Palace's Tao lecture ended, the great divine abilities of the primordial world rarely gathered together. Now, the Lady of Earth had transformed into reincarnation. The commotion was too huge, alarming the past, present, and future. Many great masters were awakened and hurriedly rushed to the Blood Sea from their training grounds. Even some great masters who had been hiding from the world for a long time came out. It could be said that almost all the great divine abilities of the primordial world had gathered in the netherworld Blood Sea. This was a grand occasion, second only to Tao ancestor Hongjuan's Tao preaching. Fellow cultivator Earth Hudu, are there any restrictions if we split a part of our consciousness into reincarnation? As soon as Huda finished speaking, someone asked. This was the Great Void Taoist, the manifestation of the Khanate Great Void origin. He was a top-notch Khanate god-fiend. Even in the Purple Cloud Palace, his potential was considered top-notch. His strength was even more terrifying. He had reached the great circle of Sage to be and was not weaker than Zhen Yuanzi, Kunping, and the others. Such a person should be famous in the primordial world and be worshipped by all living beings. However, the great Void Taoist was indifferent by nature. He did not like fame and fortune, nor did he like fighting. He only had the great Tao in his heart. Therefore, after Tao ancestor Hongjun finished his 3 sermons, he escaped into the primordial world and lived in seclusion, wholeheartedly pursuing the Tao of primordial chaos. Today, if he had not been alarmed by the reincarnation of Hutu, he would not have come into being and stepped into the mortal world again. The primordial wilderness was vast and boundless. The number of innate fiend gods that were born was innumerable. There were many people who lived in seclusion like the great Void Taoist. Not to mention the people who lived in seclusion in the primordial era and the ancient era. Even in the current era, there were many great divine abilities hidden in the primordial world. One had to know that, back then, when they were listening to the Tao in the Purple Cloud Palace, there were 3,000 innate fiend gods. These people were all Daoyuo Jingxian. They were all outstanding figures among the countless innate fiend gods of the primordial world. They could pass through the Chaos Sea and come to the Purple Cloud Palace to listen to Tao ancestor Hongjun preach the supreme great Tao. They had already proved that they had great opportunities and great wisdom. Such figures, all of them had the potential of primordial chaos. They would not die easily. Countless years ago, they had already cultivated to the quasi-saint realm. However, in the primordial world, have you ever heard of them? There were less than 100 great divine abilities that roamed the primordial world. Compared to the 3,000 mortal guests of the Purple Cloud Palace, it was only a few tenths. Where did the rest go? Could it be that they had all died? Obviously, that was impossible. Thousands of quasi-saints had died. Not to mention whether anyone in the primordial world had the strength to do so. Even the commotion when these people died was difficult to hide. They would definitely be discovered. They were all like the great Void Taoist, living in seclusion in a corner of the primordial world. Those who cultivated the Tao naturally prioritized cultivation. Most innate fiend gods were indifferent by nature. The chaos of the primordial world had nothing to do with them. In their hearts, there was only the Tao. People like Di Jun and Tai Yi, who relied on the power of providence to cultivate, were ultimately the minority. As long as the innate fiend gods born by heaven and earth did not form a faction, they would be free and alone. It was too easy for them to live in seclusion. With a thought, they could do it. If these people appeared in the primordial world, it would not be so easy for the 2 demon races to rule the primordial world. The primordial world would be much more exciting than it was now. That would be the true era of great competition. At that moment, The great void Taoist was not the only one who had rushed to the netherworld Blood Sea because of the Lady of Earth. Many of them were hiding in the dark and did not show themselves. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, please tell us. If we enter the cycle of reincarnation with our spiritual will, is there a limit? Will we be crushed by the 6 paths of reincarnation? After hearing the great void Taoist's words, many people were tempted and asked, Fellow Taoists, if you want to enter the cycle of reincarnation, you can just tell the Lady of Earth. There are no restrictions. Moreover, Daoyuo Jingxian is a transcendent. He can travel freely in the 6 paths. He can choose which Dao he wants to enter in his next life and which race he wants to incarnate into. After everyone finished asking, the Lady of Earth said, Daoyuo Jingxian was already the incarnation of the Dao. Naturally, he was different from the living beings of the primordial world. He had special privileges wherever he went. It was the same for entering the cycle of reincarnation. The 6 paths of Dao were free to come and go. They could enter whichever path they wanted to enter and reincarnate into whatever they wanted to be. That's great. Hearing that, the great void Taoist could not help but smile. Even the great void Taoists were the same. At the end of cultivation, one had to comprehend the great Tao of heaven and earth. The great Tao of heaven and earth was in everything and the nature of the universe. In order to better understand the world, some great void Taoists had to condense some incarnations to walk in the primordial world for them to understand the various states of the world. However, this method was ultimately inconvenient. It was far less convenient than reincarnation. Condensing an incarnation not only required a lot of materials, but it also took time. If something happened to them accidentally, they would lose face but lose a lot of money. And the appearance of the 6 paths of reincarnation perfectly solved this problem for them. The incarnations obtained through reincarnation were not only varied, but they could also allow them to understand the differences between different races and different lives. They could also feel the process of going from weak to strong, from mortal to immortal. This was an experience that the great void Taoists had never had before. When they were born, the weakest among them had the cultivation level of Tai Jingxian. They were the top-notch experts of their era. They rarely experienced the feeling of being weak. As for how mortals felt, or even how ordinary immortals felt, they had never experienced it before. Now, with the help of the power of reincarnation, they might gain something unexpected by experiencing it. Besides, even if something happened to the incarnations obtained through reincarnation, they would only lose a thought. To the great void Taoists, it was really nothing. And if this incarnation grew up, they would make a lot of money. No matter what, they would not lose out. Today, we owe you a favor, fellow Taoist Hudu. In the future, please take care of us, fellow Taoist. They bowed to Hutu and said, for these great void Taoists who lived in seclusion, there was nothing more important than seeking the Tao in the primordial world. Reincarnation could help them cultivate, so they naturally became close to Hutu. Fellow Taoists, it's been a long time since you set foot in the primordial world. You should stay in the primordial world for a while and see the changes in the primordial world in recent years. With a chuckle, Hutu said, these people would not join any faction. But it was precisely because of this that they appeared terrifying. If anyone offended them and caused them to join an enemy faction in a fit of anger, that would be terrible. Therefore, even if they could not rope these people in, they should try their best not to offend them. That's true. Primordial world. We haven't been back for a long time. In order not to be disturbed, these great void Taoists chose to live in seclusion in an extremely hidden place. Like the chaos outside the heavens, the deepest part of the boundless void, the mysterious and unknown place. In short, the more mysterious, the better. Especially after the liches and demons went against each other, it was not enough to be mysterious. They had to stay away from the primordial world, if not for the fact that they could not cultivate in the great chaos outside the realm. They would have run over long ago. Yes, if you can take a look at this primordial world, then take a look. I'll think about it in the future. But I might not be able to see it. Looking at the primordial world, Hutu said in an inexplicable tone. After becoming a saint, Hutu's horizons had been greatly improved. What he thought and saw were vastly different from what he had seen before. The fate of the decline of the liches and demons naturally could not be hidden from her. But she saw. So what? She could not change anything. Hutu's heart was filled with powerlessness about what would happen in the future. Because in the primordial world, other than her, there were also 6 saints and a Dao ancestor. With them around, they would not allow her to help the witch clan and reverse the destiny. Out of the netherworld, she was an ordinary saint. She could not use the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. How could she be a match for the 6 of them? But if she did not leave the netherworld, how could she help the witch clan? It was difficult. In the end, she was still too weak. At this moment, Hutu suddenly realized that saints were not omnipotent. In the past, she thought that becoming a saint would solve all the problems of the witch clan. Now, it seemed that it was a little laughable. In the primordial world, just having the power of a saint was far from enough. She had to be stronger. Stronger. She had to become stronger. Ever since Hutu was born, she had never yearned for power as much as she did now. The stronger she was, the more she could sense her weakness and powerlessness. Actually, at this time, the future of the witch clan was no longer a secret. Any great divine ability who pried into the long river of fate could deduce it. Even the experts of the witch clan and the demon clan had vaguely sensed it. But it was too late. The battle between the witch clan and the demon clan involved all aspects. The karma of the world, the karma with all living beings, the schemes of the saints, the battle to attain the Tao. There were too many such things. This was no longer a matter between the witch clan and the demon clan, but a matter that concerned the entire primordial world. The witch clan and the demon clan could no longer turn back. This battle was not up to them. Even if they did not want to fight, someone would force them to fight. The great war between the witch clan and the demon clan. They had to fight whether they wanted to or not. It was like a war between the 3 clans. Did the ancestral dragon really want to fight? No, he did not want to. However, at this point, he had no choice but to fight. Jun understood this point and knew that he could not stop the war from coming. He could only try his best to increase the strength of himself and the demon clan, hoping to defeat the witch clan in one fell swoop in the war and establish the supreme position of the heavenly court. At that time, the destiny of the world would be enhanced. No matter who planned, they would fail. Everything would return to Jun's control. He was the supreme ruler of the primordial world. Jun admitted that he was gambling. As long as he won against the witch clan, he would be the ruler of the primordial world, the true world. All the problems he was facing now would not be a problem. If he failed, he would have nothing. However, this was his only chance and the only way for him to break out of the situation. He had to gamble. Moreover, this gamble was formed under the competition of many forces. Jun was not the only one gambling. Jiang was also gambling. Even the saints were gambling. Jun was betting that the demons would win and the witch clan would lose. Jiang was betting that the witch clan would win and the demons would be destroyed. The saints were betting that both the witch clan and the witch clan would suffer. In this gamble that concerned the future of the primordial world, any party that won could suppress the other 2 parties until they could not breathe. Winning or losing was very important. In this chaotic situation, the final victory would depend on who was more skilled. In Feng Zichen's previous life, the saints obtained the final victory. From then on, they dominated the primordial world, and the witch and demon clan completely declined. But now, with the arrival of Feng Zichen, the future of the primordial world had changed. From then on, it was unknown. It was unknown whether the sage would be able to achieve the final victory like in his previous life. That was because the strength of the witch clan was much stronger than before. In order to balance the strength gap between the liches and demons, the heavenly Tao had no choice but to cheat the demons and increase the strength of Jun, Tai Yi, and the others. This was the origin of the variables. When the sage realm no longer had an advantage, the outcome of the battle would become unknown. That's true. The primordial world is really full of disasters. Perfected Taishu was powerful, so he naturally understood what Hutsu meant. Alright, let's not talk about these depressing things. The past is constant, and the future is changeable. We just need to grasp the present. Huda shook her head and said softly. The past was constant and could not be changed. However, the future had yet to happen. It was full of variables and there was room for change. Grasping the present might not be impossible to change the future. Chapter 391. The Lady of Earth was now the Lord of Samsara and controlled the Chaos Treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation. Even if she could not save the Magi, she could still protect the Magi in the Great Calamity. In the Netherworld, unless the 3 paths of heaven, earth, and man personally took action, otherwise, the Lady of Earth would be an invincible existence. Therefore, the Netherworld would be the last pure land of the Magi. It was also the escape route that the Lady of Earth had prepared for the Magi. She hoped that the day when she used the Netherworld would never come. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, we have left the primordial world for some time. It's time for us to return to our birthplace to take a look. Let's part ways here. After sorting out his emotions, the great void Taoist bid farewell to the Lady of Earth. Then I won't send you off. Speaking of which, it's time for me to go back. The 6 paths of reincarnation had just been born and was still unstable. The Lady of Earth could not leave him for too long to prevent him from losing control and causing a disaster. So, after bidding farewell to everyone, he was about to return to the Netherworld to suppress the 6 paths of reincarnation. Alright, we'll take our leave first. Just as the great void Taoist bid farewell to the Lady of Earth, a sudden change occurred in the depths of the Netherworld Blood Sea. A power that was not inferior to that of a saint erupted and swept over, causing everyone's expressions to change drastically. Huh? What happened? What a powerful power. It's not weaker than a saint. It's even stronger. For a moment, those who were about to leave, as well as those who had already left, stopped in their tracks and used their supernatural powers to look into the depths of the Netherworld Blood Sea. Even the Taoist Mingi looked over in surprise and bewilderment. Logically speaking, he should know best what was in the Blood Sea. However, he did not notice the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation at all. Now, another power that was not inferior to a saint appeared. He did not know what was going on. Was he, the Lord of the Blood Sea, fake? He had been in the Blood Sea for so long. Why hadn't he discovered such a powerful treasure in the Blood Sea? At this moment, the Taoist Mingi could not help but doubt his identity. Even the joy of the benefits from the heavens had been diluted by a lot. These things were all treasures in the Blood Sea. Logically speaking, they should belong to him. Now, they were all taken by outsiders. In the end, he was still at a disadvantage. The more he thought, the angrier he became. Everyone looked over and saw that in the depths of the Nether Blood Sea, a vast world was slowly spreading out. In an instant, it covered the entire Blood Sea and continued to expand. However, this world was not expanding towards the untainted land. Instead, it was expanding underground. It could be seen that a large amount of 9 nether chi underground was being devoured by this world, becoming nutrients for its growth. The Netherworld realm had come into being. Just as everyone was talking, the Nether realm finally accumulated enough power to manifest itself from the Nether Blood Sea and completely appear in the untainted land. This was the world that corresponded to the Heaven realm. It belonged to the world of the dead. At this moment, it welcomed the opportunity to be born. Rumble. A violent tremor could be felt. The supposedly boundless Nether Blood Sea was completely swallowed up by the Nether realm, becoming a part of it and completely merging with it. At the same time, the ancestral grounds of the ghost Tao that Feng Zichen had paid an enormous price to establish, the Fengdu Azura Mountain, had also been devoured by the Netherworld and became a member of the Netherworld mountain range. However, Fengdu Azura Mountain was the ancestral grounds of the ghost Tao after all. With the blessing of the ghost Tao and the favor of the path of death, it was obviously different from other places. As soon as it fell into the Netherworld, It was connected to the ancestral veins of the netherworld and became the head of the netherworld mountain range. The origin expanded infinitely. In the blink of an eye, it became the top famous mountain. Its size increased countless times. It was as high as the sky of the netherworld, and one could not see the end of it. Yin Mountain, the first mountain of the netherworld, the top grotto heaven of the untainted land, which was the current Fengdu Azura Mountain. As the saying went, at the foot of Yin Mountain was where the underworld was located. From this, one could see the status of Yin Mountain. The netherworld had just appeared. Before Feng Zichen could make a move, this opportunity had come first. He was really fated to be with the netherworld. Phew. The expansion of the netherworld continued, and it was getting faster and faster. The 9 nether chi deep underground was decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye, being devoured by the netherworld. At the same time, all the grotto heavens and blessed lands in the untainted land suddenly shook. Then, an inexplicable force erupted, causing the innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands to ignore the array restrictions set up by their masters. A wisp of it was forcefully separated and poured into the netherworld. This was great. Such a big thing had happened. The powerful beings who did not want to pay attention to the netherworld had no choice but to look at the netherworld to see what had happened. It had caused the grotto heavens and blessed lands to riot for no reason. The grotto heavens and blessed lands were not like cultivators. If they lost their innate origins, they could make up for it by cultivating hard for a period of time. They had to pay the price of releasing less innate chi. They had to accumulate for countless years before they could completely recover. If they did not want to wait for it to recover on its own, they could only use heavenly materials and earthly treasures. With this calculation, the powerful beings would suffer a huge loss. Of course, this alone was not enough to shock the powerful beings. What really attracted their attention was what was absorbing the origin of the grotto heavens and blessed lands and could completely set up their means. If they could not figure it out and came from time to time in the future, even the powerful beings with deep foundations would not be able to withstand such consumption. On the other side, after the netherworld devoured the innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands, the changes became even more intense. The rules of heaven and earth interweaved and floated in the void. A realm wall was formed, isolating the inside and outside, separating the netherworld from the untainted land and forming a whole. Inside, the lands of creation were born. It was eerie, as if there was ghost chi flowing, death chi filling the air, or the aura of the 9 nether. It was very magical. This was a special product of the netherworld. The innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands had undergone a miraculous change after being transformed by the netherworld. With the characteristics of the netherworld as the foundation, it gave birth to the creation that belonged to the netherworld. It was the creation that belonged to the dead. It was different from the things of the living. It was abnormally mysterious and mysterious. The innate origins of these grotto heavens and blessed lands were the nutrients that heaven and earth had prepared for the birth of the netherworld. Therefore, he did not have the slightest obstruction when he fused. When he collected these powers, he did not encounter the slightest obstruction. Let's ask, no matter how strong those powerful beings were, how could they compare to heaven and earth? Heaven and earth wanted to collect the innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands to help the netherworld be born. Even if their methods were 10 times stronger, it would be useless. They could not resist at all. When a person's strength was exhausted, the power of heaven and earth was vast and boundless. It could not be compared at all. This was the difference. The netherworld was originally a great world that corresponded to the heaven realm. It should have been born together, separated by life and death, and divided by yin and yang. However, because of reincarnation, the birth of the netherworld was delayed again and again. It was not until today that it welcomed the opportunity to be born. However, the timing of its birth was still too late. It missed the high-speed development period of the primordial world. As a result, the current it was far less powerful than the heaven realm. However, it was also because of this that in the great battle between the liches and demons in the future, the heaven realm was shattered, but the netherworld could be intact. This could be considered as a gain and a loss. There were 9 heavens in the sky, there was the 9 nether in that land, corresponding to it. When the heaven realm was born, it was supported by the starlight of Zhousing. When the netherworld was born, it was naturally supported by the grotto heavens and blessed lands of the primordial world. Only then would it be fair. What a dense aura of death! Is this the legendary death realm? The strange world born from the earth is different from the living. It completely belongs to the dead and corresponds to the heaven realm. In the eyes of everyone, a great world filled with the aura of death slowly spread out. Its aura was strange and demonic, and it was incomparably cold. It made people feel uncomfortable, especially when the gates of hell, the 3-life stone, the karma mirror, the bridge of helplessness. These strange treasures that were unique to the netherworld appeared. It made the discomfort reach its peak. These great divine abilities were no longer the young boys when they first saw the heaven realm. They had already become giants, the peak of the primordial world. Their experience and knowledge had been greatly improved. When they saw the netherworld, they would no longer make a fuss as they did when they saw the heaven realm. They did not know its origin at all. At this moment, even if they did not know the name of the netherworld, they could still deduce its origin. Good boy. These connate spirit treasures are so magical. They actually involve the path of karma and the path of fate. Seeing the treasures of the netherworld, everyone felt their hearts tighten as if they were being stared at by something. It was extremely uncomfortable. Everyone understood that it was the power of karma and fate. Such power was the most terrifying and magical. It could ignore one's realm and defense and directly carry out a rule attack. It was impossible to guard against. Even with their current realm, if they were hit by these treasures of the netherworld for a moment, they would suffer a small loss. They would not be injured, but they would definitely lose their skin. As the netherworld continued to spread out, more mysteries appeared in front of everyone's eyes. At the same time, they could not help but exclaim in surprise. They could not help but have some enlightenment, and their realm actually improved slightly. There was great terror between life and death, but there was also great opportunity. Now that the death realm had appeared, everyone felt the Tao runes of death and corroborated with the Tao runes of life. They understood the principles of life and death, so it was normal for their cultivation to improve. Fellow Taoists, this world is called the netherworld. It is a place enveloped by the path of death. It is a place of fortune like the heaven realm. It should have appeared together with the heaven realm to split yin and yang and determine life and death. However, it was affected by the cycle of reincarnation, and its birth was delayed again and again. It has only appeared today and appeared in the world. After a while, seeing that everyone had woken up from their enlightenment, Hood introduced. She was also one of the rulers of the netherworld. Naturally, everything about the netherworld could not be hidden from her. I see. On the other side, the powerful beings who had rushed over because of the incident at the dojo could not help but reveal a look of realization when they heard this. They understood the reason. It turned out that the true master of the blessed grotto heaven had made a move. The huge rock in their hearts was also relieved. It was good that it was not an outsider who made a move. The blessed grotto heaven was said to be theirs, but it was actually the primordial world. This was its true master. They were just in charge. Since the original master had taken action to collect the origin, they naturally could not stop him. There is the heaven realm in the sky and the netherworld realm underground. One yin and one yang, life and death. This is in line with the principle of the cycle of yin and yang. In the early years, not long after the heaven realm had appeared, the poor Wei had suspected that there should be a world underground that corresponded to the heaven realm. For this reason, after the master's lecture, the poor Wei had gone deep into the primordial world to try her luck and see if she could find the netherworld realm. Unfortunately, she did not have enough luck. The poor Wei had searched underground for 1,000,000 years, but she still did not find any traces of the netherworld realm. She had no choice but to leave the primordial world and choose to live in seclusion. However, I did not expect that the world nurtured by this land would only appear today. Fate really makes fools of people. At this moment, An old man in a yellow robe suddenly sighed. He was Taoist Huang Ling, an innate earth spirit. He was a top-level innate god fiend. His cultivation was not weaker than the great void Taoist. He was also an expert in the great perfection of sage to be. His killing techniques were not strong, but his defense was the best in the primordial world and could be ranked in the top 3. Even if Tai attacked, he would not be able to break through his defense without using the Donghuang Bell. As an innate earth spirit, he was most sensitive to the primordial world. When the heaven realm was born, he had vaguely sensed that there seemed to be a secret in the depths of the earth. Unfortunately, due to the cycle of reincarnation, the netherworld realm could not appear. Although Taoist Huang Ling sensed it, he could not find it. He was not the only one. In the primordial world, there were many people who could sense the existence of the netherworld realm or guess the existence of the netherworld realm. Those great divine masters who had attained their Tao with the Tao of Yin and the Tao of Earth all had some guesses about the netherworld realm. They had also gone underground to search. However, as expected, they did not find anything. The birth of the netherworld realm allowed the 3 realms to exist side by side. They played the cycle of life and death together. The primordial world became much more complete because of this. It's a good thing. Someone stood outside of time and space and looked at the primordial world with his Dharma eyes. He discovered that the primordial world now had the heaven realm above, the primordial world in the middle, and the netherworld realm below. The 3 realms were separated and each had their own duties. It was unusually complete. The heaven realm was like the Yang pole. The netherworld was like the Yin pole. The primordial world was a dividing line. It perfectly separated the heaven realm and the netherworld. From a macroscopic point of view, the primordial world was like a huge yin-yang taiji diagram. It floated in the chaos and was still rotating. As it rotated, the principles of yin and yang were deduced. It emitted a huge suction force and sucked in all the surrounding chaos energy. It refined it into the purest source of heaven and earth to strengthen the primordial world. Yin-yang taiji diagram of heaven and earth. At this moment, the primordial world was even more perfect than before. The speed at which it absorbed power from the chaos outside was also faster than before. If the chaos outside was compared to heaven and earth, then the primordial world would be the cultivators who lived in this world. As the 3 realms were perfected, the primordial world's cultivation level improved. The speed at which it absorbed power from heaven and earth naturally became faster. Believe it, if the 3 realms rotated, if it could be maintained, as time passed, the primordial world source would become more and more vigorous, and the rules would become more and more perfect. It would continue to advance until it became an eternal and indestructible world. Chapter 392. However, cultivators had tribulations and so did the world. Moreover, the tribulation was even greater than that of cultivators. The slightest carelessness would lead to destruction. Perhaps, before the primordial world could advance to an eternal world, the immeasurable tribulation would erupt and drag the entire primordial world into the ruins, causing everything to return to chaos. The immeasurable tribulation was the most terrifying tribulation. It was the tribulation that destroyed the world. Its appearance signaled the end of the world. Every world that was born from the chaos had its fate preordained long ago. It was bound to be destroyed. It was born in the chaos and returned to the chaos. This was reincarnation, and also fate. Other than the eternal world, no world could escape. And these were all tribulations that one had to go through on the path of cultivation. As long as one did not attain the great Tao and prove eternity, they had to go through it. There was no avoiding it. Even someone as strong as Pangu had a tribulation, let alone others. Only after the primordial world advanced to an eternal world could one escape the tribulation of heaven and earth. Therefore, if the primordial world wanted to break free from the fate of destruction, it could only continue to advance so that the immeasurable tribulation could not catch up with its advancement and would be left behind forever. And the advancement of the primordial world was not enough to rely on the world itself. At this time, it needed the help of the saints and the great divine powers. Let them use their own Tao and Dharma to verify with the primordial world, so as to perfect the rules of heaven and earth and make the world more perfect. This was also the meaning of the existence of saints and great divine powers. To find the flaws of heaven and earth and make up for them. Otherwise, why were there so many great divine powers in heaven and earth? They were all the vermin of heaven and earth. If not for the fact that the evolution of heaven and earth needed them, the heavenly Tao would be willing to let them exist. One had to know. The birth of every great divine power represented that he had made a great contribution to heaven and earth, perfecting the rules of the primordial world, and making a great contribution to heaven and earth. Otherwise, he would not have become a great divine power. The prerequisite for Daluo Jingxian to advance to a quasi-saint was to make a contribution to heaven and earth. If not, no matter how strong he was, Daluo Jingxian would be the end. It would be impossible for him to take another step forward. Even with such harsh conditions, the number of great divine powers and quasi-saints in the primordial world was still not small. From this, one could deduce what the primordial world was like back then. There must be loopholes everywhere. The great mystical abilities had contributed greatly to the prosperity of the primordial world. Therefore, they were able to stand high above and enjoy the worship of all living beings. To the primordial world, great mystical abilities were a double-edged sword. If used well, it would benefit the world. If he didn't use it well, he would hurt himself as well as others. After that, during the Great Lich Demon War, he just didn't use a good example. It directly shattered the primordial world into pieces. Even the advantage that he had accumulated with great difficulty was completely destroyed. The primordial world had suffered heavy losses. The current primordial world is not too perfect. If from now on, the demon lords will rule the heaven realm, and the sorcerer race will rule the netherworld. Those who become golden immortals will ascend to the heavenly realm and be under the jurisdiction of the heavenly court. The soul of the deceased has entered the nether realm and is under the jurisdiction of the shaman race. Those below the golden immortal realm reside in the wilderness. In this way, the three realms will be in balance, life and death will be in order, and the primordial world will be completely stabilized. The disturbance of eternity. Looking at the primordial three realms, everyone spoke one after another, imagining a beautiful future of the primordial world. To be honest, what the great Void Taoist and the others thought was completely feasible in theory. In the later generations, the process of the primordial world was roughly like this. The only difference was that the person who ruled the world had changed. However, theory was theory, practice was practice. The situation of the primordial world had already reached the point where the shaman and demon race had to fight. It was completely impossible for them to coexist peacefully and control the two realms respectively. Moreover, even if they wanted to, the heavenly Tao would not agree. Therefore, although the thoughts of these great mystical abilities were good, they were a little ahead of their time. Just as everyone wanted to continue discussing, a will appeared in the dark. It was incomparably vast, casting a shadow over their hearts. That was the heavenly Tao. Their words involved too much. The heavenly Tao did not want them to continue talking, so it sent down a will to warn everyone. Sigh. It's very boring. Since the heavenly Tao had appeared, everyone naturally could not continue talking. They could only sigh helplessly and continue to observe the evolution of the nether realm. From ancient times until now, anyone who went against the heavenly Tao had died. In the blink of an eye, 100 years passed in a hurry. The evolution of the nether realm was finally completed. The original location of the nether blood sea was completely replaced by a pitch-black world. That was the nether realm. It did not look big, only the same size as the original nether blood sea. However, in reality, its area was far beyond everyone's imagination. It was comparable to the largest world in the primordial world, the heaven realm. Compared to it, the nether blood sea, which was known to be boundless, was still a little small. Therefore, after the nether realm appeared, the blood sea became a part of it, occupying a quarter of its area. My opportunity has arrived. Seeing that the nether realm had completely appeared, Feng Zichen laughed out loud and walked out of the darkness, arriving in the sky above the nether realm. But who is he? Why are there other living beings in the nether realm? Seeing Feng Zichen, everyone could not help but exclaim in surprise. Among the people present, the lowest cultivation level was at the late stage of the sage-to-be realm. Those below this level could not come here. As for Feng Zichen, he was only at the cultivation level of Daluo Jingxian, so he was naturally not taken seriously by everyone. However, he, a mere Daluo Jingxian, was able to hide from everyone's perception and quietly appear under their noses. This was shocking. When did Daluo Jingxian become so strong that he could hide from the perception of the powerful beings? Daluo Jingxian was a big realm. Therefore, the gap between Daluo Jingxian, who were both Daluo Jingxian, could be very big, just like the gap between the innate realm and the Tai Jingxian realm. This was the gap between Daluo Jingxian and the powerful beings. No wonder the powerful beings were shocked. If it were anyone else, they would be the same. That fellow Taoist's name is Fengdu. Because he opened up the ghost path and enlightened all ghosts, he is also known as the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu. Previously, he had been staying in the Blood Sea, so he appeared in the netherworld. Before Huda could say anything, Mingi Taoist walked out of the Blood Sea with a gloomy face and told them about Feng Zichen's background. Taoist Mingi's current mood was extremely complicated. He did not know whether he should be happy or sad. The primordial sea of blood had become the netherworld Blood Sea. Not only was its momentum weaker, but its luck had also merged with the netherworld Blood Sea and was almost weakened by half. This almost angered Taoist Mingi. He had thought that the 6 paths of reincarnation would occupy a part of the Blood Sea's territory when the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared. He had planned to endure and give half of the Blood Sea to Hutu. After all, he had owed her such a big favor. He would treat it as paying off his debt. But he did not expect. Well, she did not care about the Blood Sea at all. She did not want any territory at all and left it to him completely. But Hutu directly moved his home. In the blink of an eye, his nether Blood Sea left the primordial land and merged into the netherworld. This was Taoist Mingi. Something that he could not even dream of. The Blood Sea was so big. Who would have thought that he would be swallowed by a world? The actions of the netherworld directly stunned Taoist Mingi. It took him a long time to react. But by then it was already too late. Everything had become settled. He could not change anything. Of course, even if he reacted in advance, he could not change anything. The Blood Sea merged into the netherworld to strengthen his origin. That was the will of heaven. It could not be reversed or changed. So it's fellow Taoist Mingi. Fellow Taoist Mingi, long time no see. Seeing that the person who came was Taoist Mingi, everyone greeted him. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Taoist Mingi returned the greetings one by one. However, during this process, he did not even look at Hutu. If it were not for the fact that the identity of the Taoist master of the Azura was obtained by Hutu, he would have long raised his sword and slashed Hutu, regardless of whether he could defeat her or not. Hutu was not surprised by Taoist Mingi's attitude. If he greeted her nicely, it would be troublesome. Putting herself in his shoes, if she were Taoist Mingi, after experiencing those things just now, she was afraid that he would not be nice to her. Moreover, she was happy to have someone explain Feng Zichen's origin. According to fellow Taoist, this person is an existence who opened his own path. That's really shocking. At this time, the great divine power was interested. He was curious about Feng Zichen. Anyone who could open his own path was a talented person. His talent would not lose to them. As long as there were no accidents, he would definitely become a great divine power in the future. This was someone who could stand at the same height as them in the future. He was qualified to stand side by side with them and receive their attention. However, why did he go to the depths of the netherworld? Just as everyone was talking, Feng Zichen rushed toward the fire of hell without looking back. He was almost there. Ghost path. Ghost path. Ghost, hiss, poor Wei understands. That fellow Taoist Fengdu has a great fate with the netherworld. Suddenly, the great void sect's heart skipped a beat. A thought flashed through his mind as he suddenly understood something. What is a ghost? A person becomes a ghost after death. What is the ghost path? The path of death. What is the netherworld? The death realm. These clues were linked together, and the performance was already very obvious. The ghost path was a path born for the netherworld. Then, as the ancestor of the ghost path, Fengdu naturally had a great fate with the netherworld. He was one of the rulers of the netherworld. As soon as the great void Taoist finished speaking, the other great divine powers also reacted. They were all powerful people. With clues and a little deduction, it was easy for them to pry into the secrets of heaven. Naturally, they could calculate what had happened. This was clearly Taoist Fengdu. He had been summoned by the will of the netherworld to collect the opportunity. This was the benefit of being the ruler of the netherworld. It was a destined opportunity. Other than being envious, they could only watch. Snatching another person's opportunity was equivalent to taking on a death feud. Moreover, it was a destined opportunity. Chapter 393. If they really snatched it, there would definitely be a calamity. Whoever the heavenly Tao gave it to, it belonged to. If others snatched it, there would definitely be retribution waiting ahead. Therefore, unless it was a last resort, the opportunity set by the heavens must not be touched. If they touched it, there would be a lot of trouble and it would easily anger the heavenly Tao. It could be said that the gains did not make up for the losses. Everyone looked at Feng Zichen in the netherworld and thought of the timing of the appearance of the ghost path. Suddenly, a strange thought appeared in their hearts. Is this really a coincidence? Or was it premeditated? The timing of the ghost path's appearance was too coincidental. As soon as the front foot appeared, Huda transformed into reincarnation and caused the netherworld to appear. It was too coincidental. It was so coincidental that it was hard to believe. It made everyone's thoughts inevitably run wild. Was it really premeditated? If it was the former, it could only be said that Taoist Fengdu's luck was heaven-defying. If it was the latter, it meant that Taoist Fengdu was far from being as simple as he seemed. On the eve of the netherworld's appearance, he opened up the ghost path and set up the netherworld. Such methods were truly admirable and far beyond everyone else. Is it a coincidence or not? Also, who is he? For a moment, everyone was very curious about Feng Zichen's identity. Even Daluo Jingxian should have a background. However, in everyone's calculations he seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He was untraceable and abnormally mysterious. At the same time, this also proved that Feng Zichen was not simple. How could a person who even they could not see through be a simple person? As for luck? That was impossible. If he was really lucky, how could he be so mysterious that they could not see through his origin? This Taoist Fengdu was most likely the incarnation of some supreme expert who had come to plot against the netherworld. Unfortunately, they could not see through his origin. On the other hand, Taoist Mingi and Huda were extremely calm, forming a sharp contrast to everyone's curiosity. Why were they calm? It was not because of him. It was because of the two of them. He thought that he knew Feng Zichen very well. In Taoist Mingi's heart, Feng Zichen was the incarnation of an ancient supreme expert, and his strength was far beyond imagination. Coming all the way to the Blood Sea to establish the Ghost Tao, there must be a deep meaning behind it. It was a pity that Styx was inexperienced and could not see the deeper meaning of the senior. He was also too embarrassed to ask, so he could only keep it in his heart and figure it out secretly. Now, with the appearance of the netherworld, everything suddenly became clear. Senior had opened up the Ghost Tao in order to set up the netherworld. His foresight was truly admirable. If the nether realm had not appeared, who would have thought that a small Ghost Tao would have such a huge effect? It directly made its master one of the rulers of the nether realm. What was a great opportunity? This was it. Senior is indeed a senior. You are indeed powerful. With a wave of his hand, the nether realm was sucked into his bag. His ability is far beyond what we can achieve. After figuring this out, Mingi Taoist admired Feng Zichen even more. His position as the strongest in his heart had also become more and more stable. It was estimated that even if someone told him about Feng Zichen's true identity, he would not believe it. Instead, he would think that someone was fooling him. On the other hand, Huda did not think as much as Mingi Taoist. From the beginning to the end, she knew Feng Zichen's true identity and the purpose of his visit. Under the orders of the Father God, to send him the merit of splitting the heavens, to form the 6 paths of reincarnation. The so-called opening of the Ghost Tao and becoming the Ghost Ancestor was completely the result of the help of the merit of splitting the heavens. After all, if he did not want to transform into reincarnation, he would never have come to the Nether Blood Sea. In that case, how could he set up the Nether Realm in advance? This was all Feng Zichen's opportunity. It had nothing to do with anything else. Perhaps, this was also the Father God's compensation to him to make up for the merit of splitting the heavens that he had lost. The position of the Lord of the Nether Realm was almost equivalent to 10% of the merit of splitting the heavens. Hutu imagined a reasonable explanation based on the information she had. It was well organized and reasonable. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, she believed it herself. What everyone thought did not affect Feng Zichen at all. Without anyone's interference, he soon arrived at the depths of the Nether Realm, where the original hell was located, the endless fiery territory. Rumble! In the fiery territory, the fire of hell burned fiercely. Terrifying power overflowed. It was bone-chilling and froze the void. What a powerful power! This is the power that hell should have. It makes Daluo Jingxian and Sage to be tremble in fear. Standing outside hell and feeling the aura of the fire of hell, Feng Zichen said with some intoxication. Ever since he became the Lord of Hell, the terrifying power of hell no longer made him feel dangerous. Instead, it made him a little addicted. Wandering in the fire of hell, he was the only master here. He could control everything here. He was the Lord of Hell, the destination of evil. Boom! Feng Zichen gently raised his hand, and the entire hell immediately rioted. In the depths, white fire of hell appeared, exuding a terrifying aura. One after another, they flew toward Feng Zichen and gathered around him, forming a white imperial robe. At the same time, 9 origins of sin suddenly appeared in the void. Like ink, they dripped on Feng Zichen's white robe and turned into 9 dark evil dragons. The black dragon shadows were lifelike, as if they were living creatures. As they bared their fangs and brandished their claws, their ferocious aura was unmistakable. There was also an unconcealable evil in their eyes, which made people tremble in fear. These were the dragons of sin. They were the shadows of evil dragons formed by the origins of sin and the Emperor's Qi. Any one of them had the cultivation of the Tai Jingxian. The 9 evil dragons were 9 Tai Jingxian. If the 9 dragons worked together, they might not be able to defeat Daluo Jingxian, but they could still defeat the Tai Jingxian. The 9 dragons' imperial robe. Feng Zichen's white imperial robe was called the 9 dragons' imperial robe. It was a connate spiritual treasure specially bred by the origins of hell for the Lord of Hell. It was a symbol of his identity. It combined both attack and defense and was extremely powerful. This treasure was very strange. Although it was a connate spiritual treasure, it did not have a fixed grade. It could be an inferior connate spiritual treasure or a supreme connate spiritual treasure. Its strength was related to hell. If hell was full of extremely evil people, those who caused chaos in heaven and earth, and those who had committed great sins in heaven and earth, the white dragon imperial robe was the top connate spiritual treasure. Even a powerful person would find it difficult to break its defense. The power of the 9 evil dragons was the same. At its peak, its strength could even rival that of a sage-to-be. This connate spiritual treasure did not rely on the power of merit to advance, but on the power of karma. That was why it was said to be miraculous. What a treasure! This is the first time I've seen a treasure that relies on karma to advance. The untainted land is so vast and full of strange things. Treasure, you'll be lucky in the future. In the untainted land, there's no lack of karma. Feng Zichen shook his robe and could not hide the joy on his face. Merit was rare, But karma was not difficult to obtain. After all, it was always difficult to do good things and easy to do bad things. It was too easy to obtain karma to advance the 9 dragons' imperial robe. Feng Zichen dared to guarantee that at least 5 of the 10 people he casually caught from the untainted land were tainted with karma. Among them, there were probably none with merit. In the untainted land, there were only a few people with merit. It was considered good if there was 1 in 10,000 cultivators. Most of them had karma. Even ordinary people were rarely seen. This is forcing me to catch people. Thinking of the situation in the untainted land, Feng Zichen muttered. The untainted land was not peaceful. If one wanted to live, one had to kill. Killing would result in karma. The aftermath of the battle damaged flowers, grass, mountains, rocks, and rivers. There was also karma. If one was not careful and shattered or injured the earth veins, the karma would be even greater. Who could guarantee that they had not killed anyone in the untainted land? Or had they used martial arts? Therefore, there were no good people in the untainted land. The environment was like this. What could others do? In fact, after Feng Zichen became the Lord of Hell, he received some enlightenment from the unseen world, allowing him to have a better understanding of karma and sin. Doing good to all living beings was doing evil to heaven and earth. In the eyes of heaven and earth, people should be like plants that withered and flourished. There should be life and death. Only then would it conform to the cycle of heaven and earth. However, people were greedy. Who would want to die if they could live? Therefore, driven by desire, they comprehended the cultivation method from heaven and earth. First, they were immortal, then they were immortal. This was naturally excellent for all living beings. However, it was not good for heaven and earth. To heaven and earth, the so-called immortals, the undying and indestructible, were vermin and thieves. To be honest, after a cultivator became a golden immortal, even breathing was wrong in the eyes of heaven and earth. Every breath of Khanate Chi was a sin and karma would be added to one's body. According to this, there were very few people who did not have karma in the untainted land. The heavenly Tao hated cultivators. Other than the Khanate god fiends that it favored, the cultivation of the other living beings was against the heavens. There were countless tribulations in the future. Reducing the number of cultivators in heaven and earth was the essence of the calamity. The heavenly Tao really did not care about the life and death of cultivators. In fact, the more cultivators died, the happier it would be. However, in the untainted land, there was not only the heavenly Tao, but also the human Tao. It was to appease the human Tao that the heavenly Tao would punish those who slaughtered the common people. Otherwise, it would not care. If the heavenly Tao really cared about all living beings, how could there be the Tao of slaughter and the Tao of Azura? Forget it. The battle between heaven and man has nothing to do with me. What's the point of thinking so much? It's better to hurry up and refine the 18 levels of hell and perfect hell. Retracting his thoughts, Feng Zichen looked at the origin of hell. There were 18 upper-class worlds there. They were the 18 levels of hell. At this time, the pagoda had been completely integrated into the origin of hell. It was only waiting for Feng Zichen to give the order, and the 18 levels of hell could be evolved. This was the purpose of Feng Zichen's visit. Since he could not control the netherworld now, he would first control hell and then slowly plan. When the 18 levels of hell were born, his incarnation would have completely gained a foothold in the untainted land. With a legitimate identity, it would be much more convenient for him to do things in the future. Chapter 394. What an evil aura! Is that a Khanate spirit treasure? There's actually such an evil Khanate spirit treasure in the primordial world? It's really unheard of. Across the world, everyone could feel the thick evil aura from Feng Zichen's 9 Dragons Emperor's robe. They could not help but exclaim. As everyone knew, there was no difference between good and bad Khanate spirit treasures. Whether it was good or bad depended on its owner's temperament. It had nothing to do with the function of the Khanate spirit treasure. However, the Khanate spirit treasure on Feng Zichen's body completely broke common sense. The aura it emitted was all showing its evil to the world. Interesting, very interesting. The world of the dead is really different from the world of the living. The laws are strange, the universe is upside down, and cognition is distorted. Everything is reversed. Even an evil Khanate spirit treasure can be born. It seems that this nether realm has great fortune and great opportunities. If there's a chance in the future, we should investigate carefully. Maybe there will be some unexpected gains. For a moment, everyone's eyes flickered as they looked at the nether realm. No one knew what they were thinking. The rules of the nether realm were different from the rules of the primordial world. Most of them were the opposite. After all, the rules of the nether realm were born from the dead. This was its foundation. Naturally, it was different from the primordial world that was dominated by the living. A world that was completely different from the primordial world. Even if they could not find opportunities in it, just comprehending the rules of heaven and earth in it could benefit the powerful. Therefore, after learning about the magic of the nether realm, these powerful people who had not appeared for a long time developed a strong interest in it. They would not let go of any opportunity that could help them cultivate. In the depths of hell, Feng Zichen stepped forward and came to the origin of hell, merging with it. Then, he used the power of the origin of hell to connect with the will of the nether realm. In the blink of an eye, Feng Zichen felt a vast will descend upon him, raising his power to an unimaginable level. Powerful. Unprecedentedly powerful. At this moment, with the support of the will of the nether realm, Feng Zichen's strength reached its current peak. With just a thought, he could distort the rules, change the world, and reverse all concepts from the very foundation. Almost omnipotent. This was something that Feng Zichen had never experienced before. He did not know how strong primordial Daluo Jingxian was. However, he knew that even the power of a great perfection demi-saint that he once possessed for a short period of time was far too insignificant compared to his current power. At this moment, even if the power he possessed was not that of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, it was not far from it. Go! After adapting to his sudden increase in strength, Feng Zichen did not hesitate. He immediately mobilized all his strength and extended it into the depths of space-time, establishing a connection with the mysterious tunnel. Then, he sent all the information about the 18 levels of hell into the tunnel, hoping that the 18 levels of hell would be recognized by the tunnel. The original hell was the product of the tunnel. Feng Zichen wanted to transform hell from the fire realm to the 18 levels of hell. Naturally, he had to get the approval of the underworld. Only in this way could the 18 levels of hell created by Feng Zichen have a legitimate position and be irreplaceable. Otherwise, without the approval of the underworld, the 18 levels of hell would not be legitimate. Even if it could prosper for a while, it would not be able to prosper for a while. It would eventually decline. As for whether it could get the approval of the underworld, Feng Zichen was not worried at all. The appearance of the 18 levels of hell was completely born with the general trend. It showed that good and evil would be repaid, and the cycle of karma could perfect the netherworld and even the rules of heaven and earth. Of course, the underworld would not refuse, and there was no reason to refuse. Rumble. After receiving all the information about the 18 levels of hell from Feng Zichen, the tunnel that had fallen into silence once again moved. It was as if an ancient existence had woken up from a deep sleep. A terrifying aura filled the air, shocking the heavens and the earth. Endless rules fell, and the shadows of all things appeared. The tunnel had descended once again. What is Taoist Feng Du doing? Why did the tunnel descend? Seeing the tunnel descend, everyone was inexplicably surprised. In the primordial world, the heavenly Tao dominated everything. It was the most common. The human Tao was related to all spirits, and it would occasionally reveal miracles. Only the underworld was the most mysterious. Since the creation of the primordial world, it had only appeared once when the Lady of Earth transformed into reincarnation. However, they did not expect that Feng Zichen would make a trip to the netherworld and cause the tunnel to descend again. How could that not surprise everyone? For a moment, everyone held their breaths and stared at the netherworld. In just a few years, The tunnel that did not appear in the primordial world had appeared twice in a row. Something major was definitely going to happen. In the netherworld, Feng Zichen pointed at the original hell and communicated with the tunnel. He swore to the primordial world. "Oh, underworld. Today I, Feng Du, see that the living beings of the primordial world do not know how to be kind to the world and all living beings. They are all greedy and murderous. They have created killing sins in the primordial world, causing negative karma to plague them. The resentment in the world is boiling and chaotic. There is not a single day of peace in the huge primordial world. Therefore, today I, Feng Du, specially set up the 18 levels of hell in the netherworld. I will collect all the torture in the world and punish the evil ghosts. Let all living beings know that they will be punished in hell after death for the sins they committed when they were alive. They will taste the endless pain of the world and suffer all kinds of torture. This is a warning to everyone that they should be kind to others when they were alive. They should cultivate more merit and not do evil. In that case, I hope the tunnel will bear witness. The 18 levels of hell. Set up." After saying that, Feng Zichen formed a Dao seal with both hands and pointed at the depths of hell, activating the pagoda. Rumble, violent tremors erupted, and the pagoda was completely shattered. 18 lifeless worlds appeared and floated in the flames of hell. The original hell was far larger than Feng Zichen had imagined. When the 18 worlds were spread out, how large was the area? Even so, it did not fill it up. There was still some space left. It was really shocking. At the same time that the 18 worlds appeared, the tunnel moved. A vast power descended and turned into a huge beam of light that blasted toward hell. Bang! With a bang, the 18 worlds were blasted into pieces by the power of the tunnel and scattered in the original hell. Then, the changes did not stop. Bang! An even more terrifying power was emitted from the tunnel and surged toward the original hell, completely enveloping it. Like kneading a ball of paper, the huge original hell, together with the fragments of the 18 worlds, was crushed into a large black fireball by the tunnel without any resistance. The original hell, together with the world formed by the pagoda, completely disappeared. They were fused together by the tunnel and formed a black fireball in the air. This is the embryo of the 18 levels of hell. Looking at the black fireball, Feng Zichen understood its origin as if he was blessed with good fortune. The 18 levels of hell. It was in this black fireball. As long as it explained the use of the 18 levels of hell, under the witness of heaven and earth, a new hell could be born with great luck. Closing his eyes, Feng Zichen silently recalled the original intention of the Buddhist sect of the later generations to create the 18 levels of hell. After going through his mind and correcting the inappropriate parts, he said, "The 18 levels of hell are the 18 levels of hell. Each level is a heaven and earth. The first level of the 18 levels of hell is called the hell of tongue ripping. Anyone who is alive will sow discord, slander others, be glib-tongued, argue with others, lie and deceive others. After death, they will be sent to the hell of tongue ripping. In this hell, the little ghost will open the mouth of the person who comes, clamp the tongue with iron pliers and pull it out. It is not pulled out at once, but stretched and pulled slowly." Feng Zichen's voice was very loud, especially with the support of the tunnel. It was even louder. Not only did it spread throughout the primordial world, even in the depths of the void, the end of time, and the endless dimensions, his voice echoed. It ensured that every living creature in the primordial world could hear it. This tongue-ripping? That's too ruthless." Hearing Feng Zichen's words, the great magical powers did not react, but the countless living beings in the primordial world were frightened. They subconsciously stuck out their tongues, but then they seemed to have thought of a terrible scene, so they quickly retracted their tongues in fear. They shivered and rolled their tongues. It was as if their tongues would be pulled out if they did not do so. It was not that the living beings of the primordial world were timid. Although the scene described by Feng Zichen was a little scary, it was not enough to scare them. Anyone who could survive in the untainted land must have experienced a lot. How could they be frightened by someone's words? It was because Feng Zichen's voice had a magical power after being enhanced by the tunnel. When it reached their ears, it actually affected their minds. In a trance, all living beings seemed to have arrived in hell, where the little ghost king with iron pliers was waiting for them. Next, all living beings encountered a scene that they did not want to recall in their lives. When all living beings woke up, the pain of having their tongues pulled out still echoed in their hearts. How could they not be afraid? Especially after experiencing it personally. The appearance of the 18 levels of hell was to warn all living beings to abandon evil and promote good. Then, how could a verbal introduction be persuasive? It was far more exciting to let them experience the pain of hell for themselves. That was why the living beings of the primordial world experienced that scene. Of course, the tunnel was not an unreasonable person. Each level of the 18 levels of hell was more painful than the last. It was not something that ordinary people could endure. Especially the 18th level of hell prepared for Daluo Jingxian. Even if it was just a projection, ordinary heaven immortals would die very miserably if they entered. Therefore, the number of levels one had to experience during this trip to the 18 levels of hell depended on the amount of negative karma one had. If one had light negative karma and had to go to the first level of hell after death, then this trip to hell would end at the first level. If one had heavy negative karma, they would go to the 18 levels of hell after death. Chapter 395. Then I'm sorry, but I'll have to experience all 18 levels of hell. If his cultivation was not as good as Daluo Jinxian's, it would be even more embarrassing. There was no need to leave the 18th level of hell. He would be burned by the fire of hell day and night in the infernal purgatory and sink into eternal oblivion. Only when his soul was completely burned and his innate true spirit turned into the origin and returned to heaven and earth could he be free. Now that the 18 levels of hell had appeared, no matter how much he said or did, it would not be as effective as killing a few people to establish his might. Moreover, the negative karma on his body had reached the level of entering the 18th level of hell. How many sins had he committed? How much damage had he caused to the primordial world? Such a vile creature deserved to die. They were also the main targets of the attack after the 18th level of hell appeared. Now, with the power of the tunnel, he could find these people from the primordial world and capture them. 1 could establish his might. 2 could save Feng Zichen a lot of trouble. So that he would not have to search for sinners in the primordial world after hell appeared. How troublesome would that be? At this moment, with the power of the tunnel, he could kill several birds with 1 stone and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Why not? As for Daluo Jingxian, that kind of person was too powerful. Just a projection was not enough to take them down. If he really wanted to capture them, Feng Zichen would have to capture them personally. This would take time. After all, Feng Zichen's incarnation of Fengdu would not step out of the netherworld unless his cultivation was a great divine power. Rumble! Not long after Feng Zichen set up the first level of hell, the power of creation of heaven and earth suddenly descended from the void and acted on the black fireball. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The black fireball trembled for a moment, and a blood-red world was born from his body. That world was so big that it was not inferior to the upper-class world created by saints. Its origin was abnormally thick, and it was the top upper-class world. One could see that there were countless blood-red shadows in that world, waving the iron pincers in their hands. They chuckled and were abnormally ferocious. This was a life formed by rules. It did not have any emotions, so it could be fair and just. This world was the first layer of hell. Afterwards, Feng Zichen continued, revealing the 18 levels of hell one by one. The second layer of hell is called the Hell of Scissors. Those who enter this prison will have their 10 fingers cut off. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart. One could imagine how painful it would be to cut them off one by one. Moreover, these 10 fingers would grow back very soon after they were cut off. Then, the hellspawn would reduce it again. Again and again he was tortured. Furthermore, the recovery of the finger did not consume the power of hell. Instead, it consumed his own essence. Only when the source was exhausted could he be freed. At that time, a person would only have a true spirit left. After going through reincarnation, it would be difficult to find the true self. As soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, the second layer of hell followed and pulled all living beings into it. At the same time, the power of creation appeared, and the second layer of hell was born. The third layer of hell is called the Iron Tree Hell. There are sharp blades on the trees, and they will pierce through the skin of the person who comes and hang them on the iron trees. The sago tree was not an ordinary tree. Anyone who was entangled by it would have their source energy absorbed by it. This process was incomparably painful. Watching one's source energy flow away without being able to do anything, what kind of despair was this? The fourth layer of hell is called the Hell of Mirror of Retribution. The mirror of retribution shines on the person's body, revealing their sins and searching for the weakness of the person's heart. This was not physical pain, but the pain of the heart. The fifth layer of hell is called the Hell of Steamers. When one's soul falls into this hell, it is like falling into a pill furnace. It will be refined by the fire of hell and its source energy will be extracted. The sixth layer of hell is called the Hell of Bronze Pillars. The seventh layer of hell is called the Hell of Knife Mountain. The eighth layer of hell is called the Hell of Ice Mountain. The ninth layer of hell is called the Hell of Frying Pan. The 10th layer of hell is called the Hell of Cow Pit. The 11th layer of hell is called the Hell of Stone Crushing. The 12th layer of hell is called the Hell of Mortar. The 13th layer of hell is called the Hell of Blood Pond. The 14th layer of hell is called the Hell of Wrongful Death. The 15th layer of hell is called the Hell of Dismemberment. The 16th layer of hell is called the Hell of Volcano. The 17th layer of hell is called the Hell of Stone Grinding. The 18th layer of hell is called the Hell of Avicii. Those who enter this prison will be burned by the fire of hell day and night and will never be reincarnated. As soon as he finished speaking, the projection of the Hell of Avicii quietly appeared and pulled the sinners into it. Immediately, hundreds of sinners in the primordial world lost their auras. Their primordial spirits were pulled into hell and died silently. Even a few Daluo Jingxian who were entangled in negative karma suffered a loss for a moment. A wisp of primordial spirit origin was pulled into hell. Damn it! Circulating their magic power and forcibly cutting off their connection with hell, several Daluo Jingxian raised their heads and looked in the direction of the netherworld with resentment. But even so, they did not dare to make a move. It could be said that more than 80% of the experts in the primordial world had gathered in the netherworld. If they caused trouble there, even saints would have to think twice, let alone them. Not to mention the tunnel hanging high in the sky above the netherworld. They would probably be blown to pieces as soon as they appeared. You're courting death. Suddenly, a loud roar resounded through the primordial world. Monstrous demonic chi suddenly erupted from a secret place in the primordial world. It turned into a giant hand and slapped toward the netherworld. The power of this palm was earth-shattering. Its aura was no less than that of a perfected quasi-saint. It even faintly surpassed it. Clearly, this was a supreme expert who had reached the peak of the quasi-saint realm and was about to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm. The power of that palm distorted the laws, shattered space-time, and tampered with concepts. It was obvious that it wanted to shatter the 18 layers of hell with one strike. A demonic expert. This was a true giant of the demonic path. It was also the foundation of the demonic path. It was far from what the world devastator Taoist Mo Luo, and the others could compare to. Such a figure was definitely a supreme expert from ancient times or even the primordial era. The left and right hands of the demon ancestor Rahu were existences of the same generation as the Tao ancestor Hongjun, the ancestral dragon, and the ancestral phoenix. There was no need to think carefully to know that such a supreme expert of the demonic path definitely had blood on his hands. His body was full of sins. He was an existence that provoked the great calamity of heaven and earth. He was not tolerated by heaven and earth. Originally, with the prosperity of the celestial sect of wonders, a giant of the demonic path like him, as the main target of the celestial sect of wonders, should have hidden well and not revealed any aura. In fact, he did the same. However, he did not expect that the infernal purgatory, with the support of the tunnel, used karma to search the primordial world and found him. His supernatural power could hide from the saints and even Hongjun, but it could not hide from the tunnel. Therefore, he was exposed. He, who had hidden for countless years, was exposed because of an accident. Immediately, without hesitation, he turned around and left, running toward the chaos outside the sky. If he did not leave, he would face the siege of the experts of the celestial sect of wonders. In the primordial world, only the chaos outside the sky could block the perception of the saints. But even if he left, the person who exposed him could not be let go just like that. Therefore, before he left, he angrily slapped out a palm, wanting to blow up Feng Zichen. As for whether this palm could succeed, it all depended on luck. If he succeeded, he would vent his anger. If he failed, he would find an opportunity in the future to give him retribution. Hiss, what a powerful demonic aura! This strength is not much inferior to the East Emperor. In the primordial world, a half-step primordial demon suddenly appeared. It gave all the great divinities a fright. However, although everyone was shocked, their reaction was not slow. The moment the demonic aura erupted, they had already begun to use their divinities. The first to make a move was the Lady of Earth. "How dare you!" she shouted in a low voice and suddenly waved her arm, striking toward the giant palm that was coming at her. Immediately, the shadows of all things appeared. Endless laws flowed, turning into a huge torrent that shattered the giant hand. On the other side, the Grand Pure One activated the Taiji diagram, the Heavenly Lord of the Primordial Beginning raised the Panga banner, the Grandmaster of Heaven activated the 4 immortal killing swords, the Nuwa took out the cauldron of heaven and earth, the Saint Jiayin held the green lotus flag, and the Saint Zhuan-Ti waved the wonderful tree of 7 treasures. They all attacked the place where the demonic aura erupted. In the heavenly court, the 3 demon sovereigns made their move. Then, many great divinities prepared their divinities. Boom! A dazzling light erupted, and nothing could be seen. Everywhere was a vast expanse of white. How terrifying was the full-strength attack of all the top experts of the Hechuan sect. It was easy to destroy the upper-class world. It could even penetrate the primordial world. Even if the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian came, he would not be able to withstand this attack and would be seriously injured. This should be the strongest attack in the primordial world. When the light dissipated, the place where the demonic aura erupted had completely disappeared. It had been beaten into a state of nothingness. Damn it! That demon escaped. After all, he was an existence that could survive the great war of immortals and demons. His life-saving methods were top-notch in the primordial world. Before everyone could react, he had escaped. Silently, the 6 saints disappeared into the primordial world and chased toward the chaos outside the heavens. This giant demon was not far from the primordial chaos Dao realm. If he broke through, it would be terrible. It was better to deal with him in time before he broke through to avoid trouble in the future. In the netherworld, Feng Zichen quietly watched all of this happen. Although he was the one who started this matter and the demon lord's target was him, at this moment, he was like a bystander and was not affected at all. The Xian sect was too strong. Especially when all the experts of the Xian sect were here. The demon lord did not even dare to show his face and ran away. At this moment, saving his life was more important. How could he care about Feng Zichen? I didn't expect that the birth of the Avicii purgatory would attract a great demon. The waters of the primordial world are really deep. The appearance of this demon lord was completely beyond Feng Zichen's expectations. He just wanted to use this opportunity to warn the Daluo Jingxian and ask them to restrain themselves in the future. Who knew that a big fish would be lured out? What a surprise! You said that you were a half-step primordial chaos expert. Instead of hiding in the chaos outside the heavens to cultivate and achieve the Tao, you hid in the primordial world. Weren't you looking for excitement? Chapter 396. Did they really think that the immortal Tao and the devil Tao could coexist peacefully? However, this is also a good thing. After this, the celestial sect of wonders owes me a favor. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly smiled. Although he had completely offended the demon sect because of this matter, he had also gained a favor from the Shen sect. Overall, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Instead of concentrating on cultivating in the chaos outside the heavens, Zhu Qing of the demonic sect risked his life and sneaked back to the untainted land to hide. There was no need to think too much to know that there was definitely a conspiracy. Furthermore, the fiend sect's conspiracy was either targeted at the primordial world or the mystic sect. Now, Feng Zichen pulled the devil out. No matter what the demon sect's plan was, it would be considered a failure. Under the surveillance of the experts of the mystic sect, even fiend ancestor Rahu could not stir up any waves in the primordial chaos, much less a half-step primordial chaos fiend. However, if that devil had not been discovered by Feng Zichen, with the devil sect's ability to stir up trouble, he would not have been able to escape. Primordial world. In other words, it was the profound sect. That would be troublesome. If he discovered them in advance, he would be able to stop his losses in advance, and he might even be able to counter the evil sect. As such, the Shen sect naturally owed Feng Zichen a favor. As for the price of offending the demonic sect, it was nothing compared to gaining a favor from the Shen sect. In the end, this world belonged to the celestial sect of wonders. In comparison, the demon sect was just a loser, a stray dog. So what if he offended him? Needless to say, Feng Zichen had a feud with the demon sect many years ago. Now, he had even refined demon ancestor Rahu's supreme treasure, the Stupa Pagoda, into the 18 levels of hell. It could be said that they had formed a deadly feud. Therefore, when facing the demon sect, his interests were aligned with those of the Shen sect. Whatever the demon gate wanted to do, it was always right for them to destroy it. He watched as the 6 sages headed to the chaos beyond the heavens to track down the demonic path's titans. Feng Zichen knew that even if the sage could not catch up, the devil would not be able to appear in the primordial world for the time being. Therefore, he no longer paid attention to the primordial world and focused his attention on the 18 levels of hell. At this moment, the 18 layers of hell had been completely born. They were shaped like inverted pagodas. One layer after another, they extended towards the depths of the netherworld realm, towards the bottom of the 9 underworlds. That hell was incomparably deep, and the deeper one went, the darker it became. There was no light at all, and it was extremely horrifying. A strange aura pervaded the air. Furthermore, the periphery of the infernal realm was shrouded in a dark red light, which was abnormally ferocious. It was formed from the baleful aura of heaven and earth, and it could corrode everything. It could prevent outsiders from getting close to hell, and it could also prevent evil spirits from escaping. It was the first layer of defense of hell. In the infernal realm, there were countless torture platforms with all sorts of torture instruments on them. There was a rich variety of torture instruments, which summed up all the torture methods of the Great Desolate Aeon. It was very frightening. The 18 levels of hell were different from the 18 levels of hell. In later generations, the 18 levels of hell created by the Buddhists were not divided according to levels, but according to different types of crimes. Depending on the sins one committed, one would enter different hells. Therefore, the 18 levels of hell of the Buddhist sect did not have a hierarchy and were completely equal. However, Feng Zichen's 18 levels of hell were different. His hell completely followed the idea that the deeper the sin, the greater the suffering. Therefore, each level of hell was more terrifying than the last. Of the 18 levels of hell set up by the Buddhist sect, Feng Zichen only took a fancy to the number and name of the 18 levels. The rest were nothing to him. After all, the philosophy of the Buddhist sect, they did not cultivate in this life, but focused on the next life. It was really unpleasant. Therefore, Feng Zichen made changes to the 18 levels of hell. He integrated the hell set up by the Taoist sect in the future into it. For example, the Tendon Hanging Prison, the Yuang Prison, the Fire Pit Prison, the Fengdu Prison, the Blood Pool Prison, the Skinning Prison, and so on. It made the 18 levels of hell even more terrifying. The 18 levels of hell did not represent 18 tortures, but 18 worlds. There were thousands of tortures in them, and they were all unimaginably cruel. Otherwise, how could they intimidate the common people? Moreover, the hell set up by Feng Zichen could extract the origin of ghosts on every level. The mistakes made by all living beings were both big and small. Naturally, they could not stay in hell forever to be punished. Once the sentence was over, they would naturally reincarnate. However, the sentence was not easy to control. Feng Zichen might as well not set a sentence. He would directly let hell extract its origin. When its origin was exhausted, the sentence would be considered over. This way, he could save a lot of manpower and strengthen the origin of hell. It could be said that he could kill several birds with one stone. In this way, the 18 levels of hell have been established. I hope that all living beings will remember the immortal Tao of Ascension, the noble Tao of Reincarnation, the filial Tao of Reincarnation, the fair Tao of Reincarnation, the virtuous Tao of Reincarnation, and the vicious hell. In the future, if you want to become an immortal and attain the Tao, you still need to cultivate more merit. Looking at the 18 levels of hell, Feng Zichen suddenly moved. He used the great Tao mantra again to persuade all living beings to be good. The fundamental purpose of hell was to warn all living beings and make them be good to heaven and earth. Even pulling people into hell to be punished was to deter all living beings in the primordial world. It was not to punish for the sake of punishment. This was the foundation of hell. It could not be messed up. Otherwise, hell's foundation would be unstable and it would be in danger of being overturned at any time. Don't deceive your heart in life. Who will be spared by the gods and ghosts? Good and evil will be repaid in the end. It's only a matter of time. In the end, Feng Zichen even composed a song for all living beings to remember in their hearts and recite at all times. As soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, a gust of cold wind suddenly blew in the primordial world, blowing on all living beings. It was eerie. It was as if an evil ghost was whispering in their ears, causing them to involuntarily recall their trip to hell. Their bodies could not help but tremble in fear. We never forget His Majesty the Ghost Emperor's words. Immense fear assaulted them. All living beings hurriedly knelt on the ground and shouted in a trembling voice. For a moment, the might of the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu intimidated the primordial world. No, no. I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Suddenly, several shrill screams sounded in the primordial world. The 18 levels of hell were established. The evil spirits that had been captured earlier immediately appeared in the void and fell into hell. They first experienced the torture of the first 17 levels of hell before falling into the pitch-black infernal purgatory. These screams were emitted by the evil spirits who could not withstand the torture. Of course, this scene was projected in the primordial world. It allowed all living beings to see it clearly. Hiss. Seeing this scene, all living beings could not help but feel a chill from the depths of their souls. Their bodies trembled even more violently. This, fellow Taoist Fengdu, isn't this 18 levels of hell too ferocious? It's against the harmony of the heavens. At the side, the Empress of Earth could not help but feel sympathy for the living beings when she saw this scene. She sent a voice transmission to Feng Zichen. Empress, if all living beings are good, these 18 levels of hell are just decorations. How can there be a violation of the harmony of the heavens? If all living beings are evil, these 18 levels of hell will punish evil spirits. They deserve it. Only then can they show the fairness of the heavenly Tao. Shaking his head, Feng Zichen replied. If they were good, this hell naturally had nothing to do with them. There was no need to care. Those who feared hell were mostly those who harbored evil intentions. The appearance of hell was to warn these people and make them dispel the evil intentions in their hearts. After sighing, the Empress of Earth did not say anything else. She naturally understood such a simple logic. However, seeing all living beings like this, she could not help but feel sorry for them. This was a result of their personality. If they wanted to change it, it would not be a one-time effort. Boom, boom, boom. As the evil spirits entered the infernal purgatory, wisps of black gas surged out from the depths of hell and merged with the 9 dragons' emperor robe on Feng Zichen's body, increasing his power by a little. This was the magical effect of this treasure. It could become stronger with the strength of hell. Freeze. Forming a seal with one hand, Feng Zichen pointed at the 18 levels of hell. With a loud sound, the hell slowly sank until it was level with the ground of the first level of hell. All right. In that case, it looks much more pleasing to the eye. As hell sank into the ground, the terrifying phenomena in the surroundings disappeared one by one. Although this place still looked terrifying, it was far less terrifying than before. After doing all this, Feng Zichen raised his head and looked at the sky. There, the origin of hell still existed. Even though the 18 levels of hell were born, it did not exhaust all of its strength. However, the origin of hell was much smaller than before. It was about a quarter of its original size. Moreover, its color had also changed. It had changed from pitch black to pure white. The aura of death and sin on its body had also been replaced by a huge aura of life and holy aura. Although the size of the origin of hell was smaller, its power seemed to be stronger and purer. Thinking about it, the origin of hell was already dense in the beginning. With the addition of the pagoda, the origin of hell was even denser. The birth of the 18 levels of hell consumed the power of the pagoda. The origin of hell did not consume much. It was normal for there to be some left behind. As for the change from black to white and the change in aura, that was the principle of the cycle of heaven and earth. Extreme yang gave birth to yin, and extreme yin gave birth to yang. All things in the world, most of them could not escape this law. Life and death were the same. If the end of life was death, then the end of death was life. After fusing with the pagoda, the aura of death of the origin of hell reached its limit. It automatically gave birth to the aura of life and occupied the center. When the aura of death completely transformed into the 18 levels of hell, the aura of life was no longer concealed and was naturally exposed. Good stuff. Looking at the white ball of light in front of him, Feng Zichen revealed an infatuated expression. This was the origin of life, the origin of creation. It was a true primordial treasure. It was a treasure even more precious than the Daluo Dao fruit. Even if a quasi-sage swallowed it, there would be endless benefits. In an instant, Feng Zichen felt several gazes fall on him. No, it was the origin of hell. Those were the greedy gazes of a group of powerful beings outside the netherworld realm. This item's origin was too dense. It was not inferior to the connate origin of a quasi-sage at the peak of the quasi-sage realm. It was a supreme creation. If they could snatch it and refine it, they might be able to take a step closer and glimpse into the mysteries of the primordial chaos Dao realm. With this thought in mind, everyone could not help but be tempted. Even a few powerful beings at the late stage of the quasi-sage realm subconsciously clenched their hands, eager to give it a try. The lower their realm, the more they desired the origin of hell. Because when their realm was high, the origin of hell was of little use to them. It might not be able to help them break through. However, it was different for cultivators with low realms. The origin of hell could definitely help them take a step closer. They had an incomparable desire for the origin of hell. Their gazes towards the origin of hell became passionate. They were like evil spirits who had not eaten for many days and suddenly saw delicious food. When their gazes fell on Feng Zichen, they felt a tingling pain. At this moment, there was no doubt that if it were not for the Hutu and the group of powerful beings present, those who coveted the origin of hell would definitely rush into the netherworld realm and tear Feng Zichen apart to seize the origin of hell. Good boy. There are so many experts. This item must not be left behind. Sensing the spying of many powerful beings, Feng Zichen immediately made a decision. The origin of hell must not be left behind. As the saying went, one was not afraid of thieves stealing, but one was afraid of thieves thinking about it. If he accepted the origin of hell, those powerful beings would probably target him and think of ways to snatch the origin of hell from him. Just thinking about this kind of situation was scary. who could sleep soundly if they were targeted by dozens of late-stage quasi-sages or even higher existences. Therefore, the origin of hell could not be left behind. This was the source of trouble. I was really careless. At this moment, Feng Zichen could not help but secretly blame himself. He was so complacent that he forgot to hide the origin of hell in advance, exposing it to the public and attracting everyone's attention. If not for that, he would have secretly hidden the origin of hell, and no one would have known. Sigh. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen sighed again and again. It would be better for him to hide such a good thing and slowly refine it to improve his cultivation. He was really muddle-headed. He even forgot to reveal his wealth. However, at this point, it was useless to think too much. It was better to think of a way to make up for it. Open. Closing his eyes, Feng Zichen mobilized all the mana in his body. With Panga's method, when he split open the sky, he slashed at the origin of hell. Rumble. Instantly, the origin of hell was shattered. Yin and Yang were opened, and creation was born. Endless rules were manifested, and a world was gradually born. Splitting heaven and earth. This was the method that Feng Zichen thought of. He really couldn't bear to give away the origin of hell. Why should he give away his own treasure? He might as well use this as the foundation to continue to evolve the world and completely consume the origin of hell. In this way, the origin of hell would be gone. No matter how much everyone coveted the origin of hell, they couldn't go to the netherworld and take away a world, right? Feng Zichen expressed. He was very willing for everyone to do this. In that case, it wouldn't be Feng Zichen who dealt with them, but the will of the netherworld that was comparable to a saint. Open! Open! Then Feng Zichen used his finger as a sword and waved it 5 times at the origin of hell before he stopped. 5 dazzling sword lights flew out of his hand with boundless Taoist rhymes. They slashed the newborn world and divided it into 6 pieces. Rumble! The rules of heaven and earth changed because of this, turning from 1 world into 6 worlds. Fengdu 6 days. What Feng Zichen wanted to do was to open up Fengdu 6 days. It was rumored that there were 6 heavens above Fengdu Luo Mountain. The Emperor of Fengdu set up 6 heavenly palaces here as the headquarters to manage and test ghosts. Among them, there were 6 heavenly ghosts and gods. As the subordinates of the Emperor of Fengdu, they were to protect the supreme dignity of the Ghost Emperor. Chapter 397. Turning 1 into 6. Although the area of the world had become smaller, but correspondingly, the speed of its derivation had undoubtedly increased greatly. In less than 100 years, the vast and boundless sky of the 6 directions appeared in the sky above Fengdu Luo Mountain, which was the highest point of the netherworld. Boom! The moment the 6 heavens were born, in the primordial world, above the 9 heavens, Zhouxing shone brightly. Streams of origin power drooped down and poured into the netherworld. One could see that. After the starlight fell into the netherworld, it merged with the source of extreme Yin, forming the shadows of dim stars that appeared in the sky above the netherworld. First, the great sun appeared and hung in the sky. The sky was pitch black, but it strangely emitted light, illuminating the dark netherworld. That was the sun of the underworld. The essence of the sun fell into the netherworld and ignited the source of extreme Yin, reaching the point of extreme Yin giving birth to Yang, turning into a dark sun. This was the only Yang in the netherworld. It was also the hope of ghost cultivators to become immortals. Ghosts were formed from Yin Qi. If one wanted to become an immortal and attain the Tao, one had to remove all the Yin Qi in one's body and turn Yin into Yang. And the sun of the underworld was formed from Yang Qi. Bathed in its light, one's cultivation speed would undoubtedly be greatly accelerated. This was a supreme treasure for ghost cultivators. After the sun, a faint moon appeared. It was cold and cheerless, dotted with a few wisps of light, releasing an oppressive cold air. This was the moon of the underworld. After the essence of the sun fell into the netherworld, it merged with the source of extreme Yin, forming a bright moon. It contained the purest innate extreme Yin Qi. It was of great benefit to cultivators who had just entered the ghost path or cultivators who specialized in the path of extreme Yin. After it, specks of starlight appeared and floated in the sky, flashing. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to notice it at all. This was the projection of Zhouxing. They were far less powerful than the sun and moon, and they didn't have anything to rely on in the netherworld. Therefore, after coming to the netherworld, they could only turn into specks of starlight to announce their existence. Rumble. The sun and moon were born, and the projection of Zhouxing appeared. The netherworld shook and became more stable and perfect. I didn't expect that there would be such benefits in opening Fengdu for 6 days. Seeing the changes in front of him, Feng Zichen could not help but feel a little surprised. He had opened up the 6 heavens of Fengdu in a hurry. He had not expected that their appearance would cause the netherworld to be further perfected. This was truly a pleasant surprise. Di Jun. Suddenly, Feng Zichen's face turned cold. He gritted his teeth and shouted a name. Zhouxing's phantoms had all appeared, but only the Emperor Star projection that symbolized the Ghost Emperor was missing. How could he not be angry? The purple star was sealed by Di Jun and could not manifest in the great desolate Aeon. Naturally, it was even more impossible for it to manifest in the underworld realm. Just as Feng Zichen was getting angry, the 6 heavens of Fengdu changed again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. One of the heavens suddenly trembled slightly as it began to absorb the tribulation aura, baleful aura, evil aura, and so on. What happened? The sudden change woke Feng Zichen up from his anger. He looked at the 6 heavens of Fengdu in front of him in surprise and bewilderment. Why should he care about Di Jun? He could not be arrogant for more than a few days. Moreover, it was useless even if he cared, he could not defeat Di Jun. Now, it was more important to care about the matter in front of him. This is, looking at the sky that was crazily absorbing evil aura, Feng Zichen's heart stirred slightly. He vaguely understood something. The 6 heavens of Fengdu had their own uses. One of the heavens was the place where the evil god lived. This evil god did not refer to the ghost god who did all kinds of evil, but the ghost god who arranged the plague to cause the great calamity. The netherworld realm had a high status, and only the 18 levels of hell could not show its might. Therefore, the evil god was born because of this. If the atmosphere of the human world was bad, and they took evil as glory and good as disaster, the netherworld realm's ruler, Emperor Fengdu, who lived in the Yin Mountain, would feel it and expel the ghost god to the human world. Or it would cause war, or it would spread the plague. It would cause the world to be in chaos. Killing to stop killing, violence to curb violence, purge heaven and earth, and rebuild order. It would show the majesty of the Emperor Fengdu. The Yin court has not appeared, but the authority of the Emperor Fengdu has already begun to manifest. Is it so urgent? After thinking it through, Feng Zichen muttered. Without thinking, he knew that the only person in the netherworld who could guide the changes of the 6 heavens of Fengdu under his nose was the will of the netherworld. It seemed that the netherworld had been holding back for a long time. As soon as it appeared in the world, it could not wait to show its presence. Feng Zichen also understood the thoughts of the will of the netherworld. Look, as his brother, the heaven realm, had already become the center of the power of the primordial world. Looking at him, he had just been born. If he did not do a few things that would cause a sensation in the primordial world, how could he compete with the heaven realm? Wouldn't he be weaker than the heaven realm? Therefore, he even took the initiative to guide the changes of the netherworld to increase his right to speak in the primordial world. However, by doing so, the will of the netherworld completely messed up Feng Zichen's plan of low-key development. He had originally planned to open up the 6 heavens of Fengdu and use it to nurture his team. When the Ghost Path had some experts to support him, he would participate in the battle for the primordial world to establish the supreme position of the netherworld. But now, the netherworld did not give Feng Zichen a chance to develop at all. It directly let him join the battle for the primordial world to seize the power of heaven and earth. F***CK. At this moment, Feng Zichen really wanted to curse. The netherworld had just been born. It had no people or things. He was a commander without an army. What could he use to compete with the demons and the heaven realm? By relying on his head? If he did not leave the netherworld, he could still protect himself. Once he left the netherworld, he probably did not need Dijun to make a move. Just one of the 10 great demon gods of the demon race would be able to blast his incarnation into pieces. The will of the netherworld was completely forcing him. Not at all. Dijun could not. The Empress of Earth. The Magi could also do it. With a thought, Feng Zichen had an idea. However, this matter was not urgent. He had to deal with the matter in front of him first. After the 6 heavens of Fengdu had finished evolving, the origin of hell was still not exhausted. However, there was only a little bit left. It was of great use to Daluo Jingxian, but its effect on the saint was minimal. Therefore, when they saw the current appearance of the origin of hell, those prying gazes immediately disappeared. Phew, sensing this, Feng Zichen could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He really could not feel at ease being remembered by so many powerful figures. After all, no matter how strong his strength was, his essence was still Daluo Jingxian. Therefore, he did not intend to leave behind such a small amount of the origin of hell. Go! As he spoke, Feng Zichen waved his hand and sent the small ball of the origin of hell into the ground of Yin Mountain, fusing with the origin of Yin Mountain. Immediately, under Yin Mountain, a magical world was slowly born. That was Fengdu Hell. As everyone knew, there were 19 levels of hell. This Fengdu Hell was the legendary 19th level of hell. Those who were powerful and wreaked havoc in the world would be imprisoned in Fengdu Hell and would never be reincarnated. That's right, it was a human, not a ghost. This was a hell specially targeted at Daluo Jingxian. As long as there was a Daluo Jingxian wreaking havoc in the primordial world, the great emperor of Fengdu could suppress him in Fengdu Hell and never be able to escape until the primordial world was destroyed. Although the 18 levels of hell were strong, in theory, they could suppress Daluo Jingxian. However, it was a hell targeted at the dead. How could Daluo Jingxian die? He would not die. How could he suppress Daluo Jingxian? Therefore, this was a paradox that could never be realized. This was the birth of Fengdu Hell. In Fengdu Hell, there was no trace of pre-celestial qi, no rules of heaven and earth, and no concept of time and space. There was only endless silence and despair. There was also endless darkness. This place was infinitely close to nothingness. Only such an environment could suppress Daluo Jingxian. Otherwise, with Daluo Jingxian's strength, as long as there was a trace of rules, he could use this as a basis to forcefully break through the world and escape. Phew, only then can hell be considered a problem. Seeing that everything was on the right track, Feng Zichen heaved a sigh of relief. After working for so long, he had finally opened up hell completely. This also meant that it was time to reap the harvest. Rumble. In the sky, the gaze of the heavenly Tao appeared. The black and yellow merit gathered. It surged towards Feng Zichen in a mighty manner. Although the merit obtained from opening up hell was far inferior to the merit obtained from turning the earth into reincarnation, it was still about 10%. It was almost comparable to the merit obtained from establishing the 3 pure ones. Speaking of which, the merit obtained from establishing the 3 pure ones was actually not much. If one were to really talk about it, the amount of merit could not even be ranked in the top 10 of the primordial world. They could become saints. It was said that they became saints by establishing a sect, but in fact, it was not. They relied on the merit of opening the heavens to become saints. The so-called merit of establishing a sect was just a primer to open the merit of opening the heavens. If not, why was the strength of the 3 pure ones stronger than Zhuan-Ti when they both established a sect to become saints? It was because the way the two became saints was completely different. The merit entered the body. Feng Zichen's cultivation was soaring. This time, he did not refuse to use merit to increase his cultivation. He was not worried about the possible hidden dangers at all. That was because the Emperor of Fengdu was only an incarnation. Using merit to increase his cultivation did not affect his main body at all. He could also use this opportunity to see the pros and cons of using merit to increase his cultivation. In that case, how could Feng Zichen not do it? The reincarnation merit that he had obtained earlier, plus the hell merit that he had obtained now, Feng Zichen did not hold back at all. He took them all out to increase his cultivation. Next, Feng Zichen's cultivation began to soar. Daluo Jingxian was in the middle stage. Daluo Jingxian was in the late stage. Daluo Jingxian was in the great perfection. The early stage of the quasi-saint, the middle stage of the quasi-saint, the late stage of the quasi-saint. In a short moment, with the help of merit, Feng Zichen's cultivation advanced from the early stage of the Daluo Jingxian to the late stage of the quasi-saint, becoming a great magician. Only then did he stop the momentum of his advancement. However, the remaining merit was not enough to advance him to the level of the great perfection of the quasi-saint. Even so, it was shocking enough. Although the quasi-saint and Daluo Jingxian were in the same realm, they were two completely different existences. The former had already begun to transcend the river of time and space, while the latter was still struggling in the river of time and space. The difference was obvious at a glance. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. What is that? Originally, everyone thought that it was over, but they didn't expect that the changes weren't over yet. They saw an origin suddenly droop down from the tunnel, forcefully twisting Feng Zichen's foundation, turning the earth flower on his head into an earth flower. For a moment, Feng Zichen's body changed again. Although his realm didn't increase, his aura was much stronger. He also had the temperament of the Lord of all things, transcending the gods and boundless majesty. Today, the great magicians of the primordial world saw a scene that surprised them. A Taoist priest who had just entered the Daluo Jingxian had crossed 5 small realms and 1 big realm in a short moment, becoming a great magician of the late stage of the quasi-saint. Moreover, he had also bloomed the only 2 earth flowers of the primordial world. It was unheard of and unseen. His cultivation speed was so fast that it could be said to be the best in the primordial world. It was enough to be recorded in the primordial world's history books and be admired by future generations. Fast. Too fast. This was the only thought in everyone's mind. What a great creation. However, how much of his strength can he unleash if he doesn't have the experience to match up to his cultivation base? Everyone was first shocked by the speed of Feng Zichen's advancement. Then, they couldn't help but think of the drawbacks of doing so. It didn't seem like a big problem to use merit to increase 1 or 2 small realms. However, it was the first time in the primordial world that Feng Zichen crazily used merit to increase his cultivation base. The strength of one's strength came from the origin, realm, and experience. The origin represented the upper limit of one's magic power. The more profound it was, the more powerful one's magic power was. The realm represented the control of the great Tao and the rules. The more profound it was, the greater its influence on the world. Experience was combat experience. The more abundant it was, the more control one had over oneself. One could often exert the greatest advantage at the smallest price. Therefore, in order to fully exert one's strength, all 3 were indispensable. However, merit could only increase one's cultivation base by one's realm and nothing else. This was like a child suddenly possessing the strength of an adult. He was strong and could be said to be invincible among children, but could he be a match for a normal adult? Obviously, he couldn't. This was Feng Zichen's current situation. If he had the corresponding cultivation realm but not the corresponding strength, any quasi-sage primary stage expert would be able to compete with him. Not necessarily. After all, Feng Zichen had bloomed the flower of the earth. His strength should be a little stronger. As expected, using merit to increase one's cultivation base isn't as simple as I thought. In fact, just as the great magicians had guessed, Feng Zichen's current situation was more or less like this. His realm was at the late stage of the quasi-saint realm, but his innate origin was still at the level of Daluo Jingxian, without the slightest increase. The experience from Daluo Jingxian to the late stage of the quasi-saint realm was completely blank, and it didn't help him at all. Compared to before, his strength lay in the fact that his influence on the world was even deeper, his mastery of the great Tao and the rules was even more at will. Strong, much stronger than before. If the current Feng Zichen were to deal with the previous him, it could be said that he could suppress him effortlessly. Chapter 398. However, if he were to face an expert of the same level, the situation would be completely reversed. He would probably be easily suppressed. The strength that was increased by merit was the lowest among the same realm. This was not a lie. Even the saints were the same. The saints who became saints with the method of merit were the weakest saints. This was personally said by Tao ancestor Hong Jun. It could not be false. In the future, if the incarnation of Fengdu fought with others, he could only rely on his realm to suppress it. It would be difficult for him to lose against Daluo Jingxian as a quasi-saint. With Feng Zichen's current situation, he could only show off in front of Daluo Jingxian. If he showed off in front of a quasi-saint, he might fail. However, this was the netherworld. The strength he could unleash was far from what he was showing now. With the origin of hell, he could unleash strength comparable to a perfected quasi-saint. With the origin of the netherworld, he could unleash strength comparable to Daluo Jingxian. This was the benefit of the karmic rank. He was almost invincible in the netherworld. It seems that I have to cultivate well from now on. Feeling the weak origin in his body, Feng Zichen was a little distressed. Experience was something that relied on the accumulation of experience. It was impossible to achieve great results in a short period of time. However, there were many ways to quickly grow the innate origin other than painstakingly condensing it. However, these methods required the consumption of a large number of precious innate treasures, especially the innate origin that could increase the late stage of the quasi-saint realm. Its value was comparable to a high-grade innate spirit treasure. Destroying a high-grade innate spirit treasure just to increase the origin of the Fengdu incarnation? Feng Zichen felt that he was not so prodigal or rich. Fengdu incarnation should cultivate by himself. At the same time, he could recomprehend every realm to increase his experience and make up for his shortcomings. Anyway, he had nothing to do now. Instead of being idle, he might as well cultivate. Before the end of the Great Magi Demon War, the thing that Fengdu incarnation lacked the most was time. However, there was no rush. Now, the netherworld had appeared. The most important thing was to suggest the Yin Court. The heavens had the heavenly court, which managed the immortals and controlled the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. On earth, there should be an underworld court that governs all ghosts and controls life, death, misfortune, and fortune. Only when the heavens and earth were in balance was the truth of the great Tao. Having made up his mind, Feng Zichen turned around and walked toward Hutu. He wanted to talk to her about establishing the Yin Court. After all, he didn't have the strength, the soldiers, or the food. It was impossible for him to establish the Yin Court by himself. Not to mention whether the great mystical abilities of the primordial world were convinced or not, just the heavenly court's attack was enough for him to suffer. Primordial world. There was a shaman. This was enough for the demons to worry about. If another Yin Court appeared, it would be better than fighting for power. Wouldn't the demon race explode? Dong Huang would probably be able to turn Feng Zichen and the Yin Court he had established into dust once he struck the bell of chaos. The demon race would never tolerate the existence of the Yin Court. Therefore, if the Yin Court wants to be established, it had to be the sorcerer tribe. Only the Yin Court established by the Magi could not be afraid of the demons and shock the primordial world. At the same time, the Yao didn't dare to rashly attack the Yin Court. Moreover, the netherworld was the backup plan that Pangu had prepared for the Magi. It was only natural for them to establish the Yin Court. In addition, Feng Zichen was a Magi of the Magi. He naturally had to live up to his identity and plan for the future of the Magi. Although establishing the Yin Court could not change the fate of the Magi, it could protect the Magi who remained in the netherworld and leave some foundation for them so that they would not decline so miserably. This would not be in vain for him to interact with the Magi. Whoosh, whoosh. Just as Feng Zichen turned around, two rays of light suddenly appeared out of nowhere and flew toward him at an extremely fast speed. The speed was so fast that it seemed to be traveling through the river of time and space. It ignored all space-time and created the illusion that space-time was stagnant. The moment Feng Zichen saw them, they suddenly appeared in front of him. A powerful force suddenly attacked, forcing Feng Zichen to take a few steps back. What a powerful force! Could it be that as he retreated, Feng Zichen felt something in his heart and vaguely sensed the origins of the two. In the netherworld, there were only two treasures with such power, and they had not appeared in the world. There were only two treasures that met such conditions: the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. This was one of the few treasures in the Nether Realm that could retain its full strength after leaving the Nether Realm. It could be said that the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were the most precious treasures in the Netherworld apart from the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. This was the symbol of the Netherworld. After stabilizing his footsteps, Feng Zichen raised his head to look at the 2 balls of light floating in the air. The balls of light were dark purple, indicating that countless mysterious runes were flowing around them to isolate them from the outside world. Even with Feng Zichen's current cultivation, he could not see through the surface of the balls of light to investigate the situation inside. After waiting quietly for a while, he did not sense any dangerous aura. Feng Zichen tentatively used his spiritual sense to touch the 2 dark purple balls of light. Kacha! Kacha! With a shattering sound, the 2 balls of light shattered, revealing a jade book and a jade brush. They were the treasures of the Netherworld, the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. Good. Seeing these 2 items, even Feng Zichen, who had seen treasures before, could not help but exclaim in surprise. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were both supreme-grade Khanate merit numinous treasures. They were powerful and could be said to have endless uses. Although the Book of Life and Death was small, it recorded the information of all living beings in the primordial world under Daluo Jingxian. Their life and death, misfortune and fortune, their lifespan, and when they died were all recorded. This treasure not only involved the Tao of life and death, but also the Tao of fate. With this treasure, one might be able to see the mysteries of fate. It was truly unfathomable. Moreover, it was the human book of the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man. It had boundless luck. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was one of the top 10 Khanate numinous treasures of the primordial world. The Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush was also known as the Judge's Brush. Although it did not have as great a background as the Book of Life and Death, it was still extremely powerful. In the future, its name would resound throughout the 3 realms, causing people's expressions to change. With a stroke, it could change one's lifespan, change misfortune, and even determine life and death. This was a Khanate numinous treasure nurtured by the Tao of life and death. It had even fused with a portion of the concept of reincarnation, making it even more powerful. With a stroke of the brush, it could stir up the laws of life and death and achieve the effect of reversing life and death. Its power could be said to be terrifying. In particular, the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush and the Book of Life and Death were a set of Dharma treasures. When the 2 were combined, their power would increase exponentially. Living beings under Daluo Jingxian only needed to use the Judge's Brush to write his name in the Book of Life and Death. In an instant they would die. Even a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal was not unkillable. As long as he captured a wisp of his aura and sent it into the Book of Life and Death, he would use the Judge's Brush to swipe fiercely. Even Daluo Jingxian would not end well. If it was light, his true spirit would be shaken, and if it was heavy, he would be severely injured. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were definitely top-notch killing treasures in the primordial world. And the most terrifying thing was that he attacked in the dark. He killed without coming into contact with the dead. It was extremely sinister and impossible to guard against. In terms of this point alone, there were very few people in the primordial world who could compare to it. Even some curse-type connate numinous treasures could not compare to it in terms of silently killing people. It could be said to be the best in the primordial world. Such treasures were Feng Zichen's. How could it not be exciting? In the netherworld, there were only 3 people with great divine abilities: Feng Zichen, Hudu, and Taoist Mingyi. Hudu was the lord of samsara and controlled the chaos treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation. Of course, the book of life and death and the brush of reincarnation could not be given to her. Otherwise, Hudu could really do whatever she wanted in the netherworld. As for Taoist Mingyi, he was the lord of the blood sea and the spokesperson of the primordial killing path. He already had 5 supreme-grade numinous treasures in his hands. These 2 treasures could not be given to him. After thinking about it, only Feng Zichen, the current lord of hell and the future lord of the netherworld, was most suitable to hold the book of life and death and the spring and autumn samsara brush. This second treasure would appear in front of Feng Zichen. Without hesitation, Feng Zichen took a step forward and took the book of life and death and the spring and autumn samsara brush. As expected, these 2 items were prepared for him. Without the slightest resistance, Feng Zichen branded them with his true spirit. With the treasures in his hands, Feng Zichen could not help but let out a hearty laugh. Previously, he was still wondering why the book of life and death and the spring and autumn samsara brush had not been born after the netherworld had been born for so long. Could it be that they were not fated with him? Because of this, he was disappointed for a while. He did not expect that they did not appear because they were waiting for hell to be born. This time, Feng Zichen had fully learned his lesson from the last time. As soon as he realized that something was wrong, he used the power of the origin of the netherworld to cover up everything around him, so that outsiders could not pry into it at all. Of course, not everyone. At the very least, he could not hide it from Hutu and Taoist Mingyi. These 2 people were also the supreme gods of the netherworld. If they did not have other important tasks, they would definitely be Feng Zichen's biggest competitors to become the lord of the netherworld. Because of this, Feng Zichen had not become the lord of the netherworld. In terms of control of the netherworld's origin, he was not much stronger than the 2 of them. His cover-up naturally could not be hidden from the 2 of them. But this was not important. With the birth of the netherworld, the 3 of them, who belonged to the netherworld, naturally became an alliance. Their interests were united against the outside world. Even if they did not help him, they would not undermine him. With brisk steps, Feng Zichen arrived outside the netherworld in the blink of an eye, where Hutu was. The moment he left the netherworld, Feng Zichen felt a wave of discomfort. His almost invincible strength instantly disappeared. That was the strength of the netherworld's origin. After leaving the netherworld, of course, he could not use it. After a while, Feng Zichen adapted to the sudden drop in strength. Fellow Taoist Feng Du, you're finally willing to come out. Chapter 399. Today, fellow Taoist, you have broadened our horizons. Seeing Feng Zichen walk out of the netherworld, before he could take the initiative to speak, Hutu said exaggeratedly. Actually, it was not an exaggeration. Opening up 25 top-notch upper-class worlds in a row was something that even a saint might not be able to do, and it was done so easily, as if it was effortless. This was truly shocking. Of course, these great divine abilities also knew. Feng Zichen must have used a method that they did not know. However, to be able to come up with such a method, it already proved that he was extraordinary and definitely far surpassed them. After all, the 25 upper-class worlds were placed in the netherworld. No matter how they observed, they could not understand what method Feng Zichen had used to be able to open up those upper-class worlds so effortlessly. Of course, these great divine abilities would not know that Feng Zichen had integrated the pagoda into the origin of hell before the netherworld appeared, preparing for today's matter. It was all for this moment to amaze the world. Think about it, opening up 18 top-class upper-class worlds in one go, how incredible was this? To be able to do this, How extraordinary would he be? He must be a great expert that was beyond imagination. Thinking about it, even if he was not a primordial chaos expert, he was not far from it. Of course. This was only Feng Zichen's original plan. It was said that plans could not keep up with changes, and this time was no exception. With the help of the will of the netherworld, he opened up the 6 days of Fengdu and the hell of Fengdu in addition to the 18 levels of hell. This was great, he had gone overboard with his acting. However, looking at everyone's attitude, it was obvious that the effect was obvious. Regardless of whether he succeeded in pretending to be a peerless big shot, he had been labeled as mysterious. That was enough. Mysterious. Represented the unknown. Represented infinite possibilities. That was the best way for him to hide his true identity. Ha! Fellow Taoist Hood, you must be joking. That was all the power of the will of the netherworld. Poor Wei was just taking advantage of the situation. Of course, she didn't have to spend too much effort. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen said humbly, pushing everything onto the will of the netherworld. Ha! Fellow Taoist Fengdu is really modest. When the crowd heard this, they naturally did not believe it. If all of this was really led by the will of the nether realm, then how could Feng Zichen obtain so much merit? The heavenly Tao was fair. The amount of merit that would be bestowed would depend on the amount of contributions one had made. There was no favoritism. Based on Feng Zichen's merits, it was not difficult for them to guess his role in this matter. Naturally, they did not believe his words. No one believed him. Feng Zichen didn't explain much. What he wanted was for everyone to fill in the blanks on their own. Only his own imagination was the most invulnerable. However, there were so many people here that Feng Zichen couldn't discuss the establishment of the Yin court with Hutu. Lin court. This was a major event that could affect the development of the primordial world. Of course, the more secretive it was, the better. It was impossible to announce it to the world. If someone with ulterior motives were to find out about this, it would be hard to avoid variables. Especially after the heavenly court found out, they would be prepared in advance. The effect of the birth of the Yin court would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. The birth of the Yin court required the element of surprise in order to achieve the greatest effect. Before Dijun and the others established the heavenly court, they did not publicize it. Instead, they developed it in secret. After obtaining the Tao ancestors' consent, they made it public. Feng Zichen was such a low-key person, so he would not publicize it. Therefore, he started chatting with everyone here. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a huge vibration came from the sky. Then, 6 terrifying figures descended from the sky and arrived outside the netherworld. The saints had arrived. It turned out that the 6 saints had walked around the chaos outside the sky and did not find the devil. They knew that if they continued to stay here, they would not be able to find any traces of the devil. Thus, they returned to the primordial world. However, since they had already come out, the saints could not return empty-handed. Thus, they set their sights on the netherworld. Back then, when the heaven realm appeared, the cultivation of the 6 saints was not the strongest. They were on the same level as the Khanate godfiends. They did not have an overwhelming advantage. They were even inferior to the Eastern Emperor Tai. The demon race was powerful. In addition, the Eastern Emperor Tai suppressed the primordial world. They had their eyes on the heaven realm, so no one dared to compete with them. Even the 3 pure ones had to avoid them. Therefore, the heaven realm belonged to the demon race. Outsiders had no chance to interfere even after becoming a saint. Now that the netherworld, which was on the same level as the heaven realm, had appeared, they naturally could not stand by and watch. They could not interfere in the heaven realm, but they could not miss the netherworld. Now was different from the past. They were already saints, the peak of the primordial world. Everything that happened in the heaven realm would never happen again. Poor Wei congratulates fellow Taoist Hutu on attaining the Tao. Retracting their auras, the 6 of them congratulated Hutu. Then they said to everyone, "Fellow Taoists, it's been a long time since we parted in the Purple Cloud Palace." After the Tao lecture in the Purple Cloud Palace ended, The former fellow disciples went their separate ways, but it was difficult for them to meet again. It was rare for them to meet again today. Even the saints could not help but sigh. Greetings, fellow Taoist Taiqing, fellow Taoist Yuqing, fellow Taoist Xianxia, fellow Taoist Nua. Everyone returned the greeting. The former fellow disciples and the current saints could not help but feel melancholy when they saw them again. Back then, they were on the same level. Now time had passed. When they saw each other again, they were already separated by heaven and earth. In the past, when you became saints, we were not in the primordial world and did not go to congratulate you. Today, we will make up for it here. However, a great mystical ability user was ultimately a great mystical ability user. In an instant, he adjusted his mentality and even teased the Grand Pure One and the others. Congratulations, fellow Taoists, on attaining the Tao. After saying that, everyone laughed out loud. Even the Grand Pure One, who was usually indifferent, was the same. This laughter was incomparably candid, and it contained a sense of freedom. There were no schemes or tricks mixed within it. The saints had not been so relaxed for a long time. For a moment, everyone seemed to have returned to the days when they first listened to the Tao in the Purple Cloud Palace. That was a period of days without worries. Everyone only had the Tao in their hearts, and there were not many conflicts of interest. Unfortunately, everything could not go back. The past was destined to be the past. After the laughter, what was left was melancholy. Humans. They would always live in the way they hated the most. Inexplicably, everyone present was enlightened, and their state of mind actually improved slightly. Fellow Taoists, why are you here? After a moment of silence, the Lady of Earth was the first to break the silence. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone recovered from their melancholy. The past was the past. If they were obsessed with the past, how could they improve? Looking at the future was what they should do. In the blink of an eye, everyone's Tao hearts calmed down again. They began to think about the purpose of the saint's visit. The saint came here. What was his purpose? As for congratulating the Lady of Earth for achieving the Tao, naturally no one believed it. If they really wanted to congratulate the Lady of Earth for achieving the Tao, why did they do it earlier? Why didn't they come when she had just achieved the Tao? Instead, they came after nearly 1,000 years. Wasn't that clearly saying that there was something wrong with them? Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, the poor Wei saw that the netherworld had just been born and the living beings inside were extinct. She wanted to send an incarnation to guard the netherworld, impart the supreme great Tao, enlighten a place, and help the netherworld evolve living beings. The 6 of them looked at each other. No one was willing to be the first to speak. In the end, as the eldest senior brother, the Grand Pure One had no choice but to stand up and say, this. As soon as he said that, everyone present was in an uproar. How shameless! Everyone present was smart. How could they not understand what the Grand Pure One meant? They had taken a liking to the netherworld and wanted to get a share of the pie. What about imparting the supreme great Tao and enlightening a place? They were all excuses. They were already sending incarnations to stay in the netherworld. Wasn't their goal clear? Fellow Taoist Grand Pure One, what do you mean? At that moment, not only did the Lady of Earth's expression change, but even the expressions of Feng Zichen and Taoist Mingyi turned ugly. Now, the 3 of them were the rulers of the netherworld. How could they tolerate outsiders spying on this place? That was the foundation of their Tao. Even if the saint wanted to touch it, they would dare to risk their lives. Stopping me from achieving the Tao is worse than killing me. It was the #1 enemy of the primordial world. If the saint's incarnation entered the netherworld, would the world still belong to them? Moreover, they did not dare to touch the heaven realm, but they dared to touch the netherworld. What did that mean? Were they looking down on the netherworld? The Grand Pure One did not say anything. Instead, he took a step forward. At the same time, the other 5 saints also took a step forward. That posture, it was obvious, he wanted to use his power to suppress others. You, the Lady of Earth, are only 1 person, but we have 6 people. If you don't agree, we will fight our way in. What can you do? Fellow Taoist, are you bullying me because I'm alone? Seeing this, the Lady of Earth questioned sternly. At the same time, just as she finished speaking, the 11 ancestral magi quietly appeared and stood behind her, staring at the 6 saints together. It was as if he was standing up for her. Yes, the Lady of Earth was not alone. There were many of them, but the Lady of Earth also had many brothers and sisters. The atmosphere at the scene, immediately, they became nervous. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, now that you have lost the body of the ancestral magi and can't set up the 12 divine wraith array, you have lost your greatest reliance. If you join forces, you won't be able to stop the 6 of them from Poor Wei. Besides, Poor Wei and the others don't want to occupy the netherworld, nor do they have any intention of getting involved in the cycle of reincarnation. They just want to set up a Tao field here and wait for the future to preach the Tao. In that case, are you unwilling? Seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more tense, as if a fight was about to break out, Nuwa could not help but step forward and say. Her tone was filled with helplessness. It was as if she did not come here on her own accord, but was forced to come by someone. Thinking about it, it made sense. Nuwa had never established a sect, nor did she take in any disciples. Back then, she had even rejected the recruitment of the demons. She did not even take one of the 9 heavens seriously. Now, for the sake of the netherworld, she did not hesitate to personally come. It was obviously abnormal. Everyone could understand why the 3 pure ones had brought Xuanti here. Only Goddess Nviwa was here, which puzzled everyone. You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.